you everyone for coming. This is a joint meeting now between the Public Safety Study Committee and the Singapore Golf Course Master Planning Committee. We've noted that there's a lot of things we need to work on together to accomplish our goals here. So I think this is a good way to do it. So if we can just, our committee just focus everything, at least in the beginning, on these joint efforts, and then do our own administrative stuff afterwards to keep on track and keep things moving. I think from the presentations that we did at the Board of Selectmen a couple weeks ago, and some of the work we did over the past week on these, this plan around the loop road around Choate Field, that this is the way our committee is moving, and ultimately this is what the presentation that we do, and if you want to call them recommendations, will be focused on. I think that we have different plans that we've worked on that shows that almost all of the groups that have come to us can be satisfied, at least in part, by this plan that we're working on now, or these couple plans that we're working on. So that's one area that I'd like to focus on, and then the other area is kind of on the tail of your meeting, how we can work together and what we can do to get the information out there, encourage people to come to the meeting, make sure people know about the meeting on March 8th, things like that. I heard from a couple people today that I think we hear that there are vocal groups opposed or that have concerns about it, and you don't know about how big those groups are. I've heard today from people that say there are a lot of people that are for Article 1 and 2 and are for this process, and they don't really know, they didn't know when the vote was, they didn't know what to do to support it. So there's obviously things we can do better to get the word out there. So I think those are the things that two things that we should do in the beginning. Does anybody else have anything to add to that, or things that you want to talk about?
I agree the communication needs to be enhanced.
Yeah, so I don't know if we can start with what you guys are doing at the transfer station and maybe work off of that if you want to talk about what you've done and see if we can do that with you or jump in on that. Or...
Can we ask questions on
this
plan as well?
I think I was just going to talk about things we can do, see if we can throw ideas out there to get the word out, and then we can work into talking about these plans.
So very briefly, what we're doing is we're staffing the transfer station approximately 8 to 4 on Saturdays. Our group has taken, we are an appointed committee of the town, so we are taking a very passive approach, and we have basically 4 poster boards, hopefully 5 if everyone's on board with the site plan tonight. Really just using it as an eye catcher to residents, and we're finding a lot of residents come over, ask questions. Some have no idea what was going on. Some are looking for some of the information that Brian mentioned, and some are looking for very specifics of where are the fire apparatus bays, where do they come out, are you taking part of Choate Field, more specific questions depending upon what they have read or not read. And then we pretty much have a leave behind flyer, which is I'll call it like our top 10 frequently asked questions. It was originally focused mainly on public safety. It's now been tailored more toward not only public safety, but kind of what the land deal really means, referencing the P&S that's now on the town website, and also referencing what really would happen to public safety if Article 1 got defeated, because obviously that need would not be taken care of. So that's what we're doing. We're having a lot of good dialogue. Obviously there's varying views on the issue and priorities, but we're getting a lot of feedback, I feel like, every week of things that we can do to message it out. So there are only 6 members of our committee that are partaking in that, so that's a lot of hours to fill, and we're doing it in 2-person shifts. We are posting a public meeting in case we do perhaps have 4 people on site at any given time, so you'll kind of keep seeing us posting those public meetings, but that's what we're doing. Our committee just had a discussion right before this about taking some of our frequently asked questions that most of you have probably read on on the town's website, and really kind of blasting those out to the local media on a frequently basis. Our committee is unanimous in that approach, just spreading the facts, continuing to answer questions that residents do have.
So I think one of the things that we can do is at least try to accompany them during those times, and I don't know if everybody's okay with that. I just think we can accompany them or try to have some sort of participation with them to help their efforts. You know, it's a lot of hours to stand there. You get in contact with a lot of people. So I think in these last couple weeks, really before the vote, like this is crunch time, to get the information out there to people and encourage them to show up at that meeting on March 8th.
I think it would be very helpful, because a lot of questions that I find myself fielding are asking more questions on what else can be done there, what are you looking at, where else can be developed, the questions that we don't have the answer, but we'd like, you know, you might want to check with the.
So I'll start posting those meetings in the event that a quorum of us show up, and, you know, we'll try to encourage people to be there for at least a few, you know, an hour or two at a time.
And if depending on what we discussed on the site plan tonight, if you have other diagrams, we found that to be very helpful to kind of articulate certain points depending upon the questions. But I would say, to echo John's point, the number one question we are getting are questions probably better fielded by your committee and not our committee.
Yeah. Okay, great. So hopefully we can all do that and participate a little bit in some way. The only thing I'll touch on before we go on to the plans is also towards the tail of your last meeting, and there's been some talk about the recreation email that went out. Recreation meeting tomorrow. It was last week to discuss the warrant articles and some other things about the design in Choate Field. It was delayed due to weather to tomorrow, so Recreation will have an opinion on those things tomorrow. The email that was sent out was not an endorsement of any group. I'm not sure I would classify it as a mistake, but it was not an endorsement. It was simply a notice of a meeting. And I thought it was probably not designed appropriately, and there may have been it could have been better worded, but we will address that after the meeting tomorrow. For those of you that aren't aware of what it was basically a meeting for Article 4. So the proponents of that meeting, and it was sent out to everyone through the Recreation Commission. So that being said, we can move on to the plans that were done in this last week. A couple members of each committee, along with the 2 consultants, and the chiefs worked on some updated plans of this loop road concept. Does everybody here have copies?
You have extras, unless you want to spread a few back.
Oh, yeah, like it. Yeah. Yeah, it was the same thing sent to you.
Brian, do you have an extra copy? Yep. Another copy than mine. Thank you.
So I think this is the plan that we have that is getting towards, you know, like I said, not everybody is going to be happy, but it accommodates, or as a result of all of the meetings that we had, this seems to be a functional design and accommodate the most amount of people while not sacrificing anything to the public safety complex. So I don't know if there's Do you have anything on that?
No, I mean, we collaborated with the Public Safety Committee, Site Committee, and their architect, come up with this plan. One of the basic premise was to try to site the facility in a way that would create some mutual benefits with some of the existing uses, and both on the golf course property and adjacent to the golf course property. So with the genesis of a loop road concept, we started to take down the boundaries between the three so that we could play a little bit more with how something like this might lay out, and then back into some of the known constraints and the physical constraints and functional constraints and requirements of the public safety complex. So if anyone would care, I could describe a little bit as to what's happening here. Essentially, the public safety complex has been rotated slightly. The footprint of the whole complex has been essentially flip-flopped, so that the fire department is on the right-hand side of the facility, as opposed to the prior concept we had on the left-hand side of the complex. We've modified the loop road in a way that presently is done in a way so that it minimizes the encroachment to the choke field property. It provides the additional parking that could be used for the benefit of the public safety complex as well as the Woodward School and choke field. There's a plan that I don't think we have copies to circulate, but we had presented it last week that showed the entire golf course property as well as the school property in choke field that shows some other modifications that could be made. And then there's this extension from that loop road that runs behind the public safety complex, which is to demonstrate that the golf course parking and pro shop could be replicated in that location. All of this being done with making the siting and the functionality of the public safety complex a priority to the master plan, but again, doing it in a way that is actually providing some added value to everything around it. And I think what's important to make sure that we all understand here is that not only is this good planning, but it's going to help foster support of the warrant, because you're now going to be offering more than just the siting of a public safety complex. You're adding parking to a parking constrained recreational field. You're adding traffic flow or facilitating traffic flow to and from the Woodward School. You're allowing for the golf course to continue should that be the decision to do so. It's not part of this project, but none of these things are part of the project other than the public safety complex. But you're allowing the property and its surroundings the ability and the flexibility to do something else in the future under separate initiatives. And that could include, if it came time to, if there was such a time where the Woodward School was to be repurposed, that could become a municipal facility that could house other uses such as a rec center, a library, a council on aging, office space, whatever that might want to be going forward. There's plenty of other things you could look at in playing with that side of the equation, but that's not our focus. We just wanted to demonstrate that with a little adjustment to what's been done, we can add a lot of value to the general area and still minimize the impact of the golf course property itself, so it can be preserved for continued golf course use or whatever the town deems appropriate. So that's the siting in a nutshell. I think one of the things that was addressed during this past week when we flip-flopped the building here, we had to make sure that we created the necessary security as well as circulation an exclusive circulation for the public safety complex. So there were some different iterations of this that showed perhaps some breaks in the island between the two driveways, but that for security and safety purposes, it was deemed that was not going to be appropriate for the unfettered use of the safety complex. One of the earlier concepts had a sharing of the driveway, if you will, on the left-hand side of the complex, and not a separate access road. But again, that was determined it was best to keep that separate, not only so that the public safety complex could operate undisturbed, but also so that it kept the project defined. And I think what's important to point out here is that the presumption here is that this siting is being done in a way that is not substantially altering all of the work that's been done by the Public Safety Study Committee and the architect. And all of the, so all of the hard lines, if you will, which is the public safety complex, is still based on all the work that's been done, all the budgeting that's been done. The loose lines are essentially future work that the town could undertake under separate initiatives. And so we're not compounding matters by adding to a budget for a project. Everything's trying to be kept separate, but you need to illustrate in a way to show that it can be done, should the town decide to go and do that.
Thank you. Lisa, you had some
I
stuff
just
on
had
that?
a couple of questions I wanted to ask. On this plan, the gravel parking lot, are the setbacks for that zoning taken into effect?
They are.
So it's the-
There is a rear yard setback there. However, for parking purposes, you are allowed under, I don't know if it's as of right or special use, to actually go into a setback, but only for parking. So it doesn't use up the entire setback area. If I'm not mistaken, the rear setback is 30 feet
For a building.
for a building, right, but for parking.
Parking is 10.
10. And again, this is just to illustrate that something can go back there. That's not what the configuration would be.
Yeah.
It's just to show that the area of the parking lot is a close approximation of what exists for parking today at the golf course. The pro shop, the hashed in rectangular area is an approximate replication of what is there today. That would be a completely separate exercise.
Right, well, why I ask is if this is going to be presented at town meeting or to the public,
Yeah.
it's better to have the questions asked now
Sure.
than on town meeting floor, if somebody asks these
Sure.
questions.
We-
Possibly, could there be lights in this parking lot? You know, now
It-
you're
it-
backing into a
it's-
neighborhood,
it's-
and I know this is general, but
It's
again,
It would be to be determined. As
These-
a matter of fact, it was labeled gravel because it's replicating what's there now.
Right, right.
So it wasn't meant to define anything. As a matter of fact, some of the earlier concept had a much more defined parking area and pro shop. And we actually instructed the engineer to just make it a general area, because that's not what we're proposing to do. We're just showing that it would be a good location to put it,
okay.
without it impacting the other adjacencies.
Okay, and another question is, do we know where the septic would be in relation to, I see drainage ponds, but where would the septic possibly be placed? Because I think the golfers have said at one point it could affect the, obviously maintaining the greens and watering and such if it's on the septic. So again, I'm just asking
Yeah.
the question.
I'll defer to Jeff about Sweeney, but one of the discussions we did have was whether or not, while we're not building a facility,
Mhm.
you know, the question arose at last week's meeting as to whether or not, since there's a new septic field that will be designed to accommodate the Woodward School and the public safety complex,
Mhm.
could the septic field itself be specified so that it is large enough for it to be tied into by a pro shop at a later date,
Right.
rather than having a separate thing, what would, you know, I don't have an answer to that, but that was one of the questions that came up.
Okay, well, no,
I
because I mean,
spoke with the Board of Health, Paul Brzezinski, about that. He said the school would take 5,000 square feet, the public safety would take 4, and he thought that the pro shop or whatever it would be might take 400. And somewhere somebody said at one time that they all couldn't be tied together, but he said there's no reason why they couldn't be tied together.
Well, I think it wasn't that they couldn't be tied together, it's just that nobody wants to incur the cost of tying everything together now, but that doesn't mean you can't at least design something for it to be tied in the later date.
The other interesting thing he came up with was that there's a new type of leach field, it's called the drip irrigation leach field, and it's only 6 inches below the surface of the ground, and it could be under like a fairway or something like that. It couldn't be under a green, but it could be under any other part of the golf course, so that may make it an easier placement situation.
Yeah, Jeff Shaw, I'm principal of Donovan Sweeney Architecture, and we've been working with Public Safety Committee in charge of public safety building, and I'll just throw my 2 cents in about the septic field. We didn't show it here mainly because it was generally in the same locations that we've been showing it, and that is to say on that hillside somewhere where we can find good perkable land. And I think that's been the case from the beginning, because the town has never done any test pits there to determine the perk rate. And so we've been defining a zone, not knowing whether or not that zone was going to perk well, or we'd have to move that left, right, center. So the idea is that it's going to go on the hillside at some point. If the decision by the town in the future is to, or before this project is underway, is to put a golf course there and they want to reserve that area for the green, then obviously we would have to move our field further to the right in this case, or to the south. I think the only cost would be simply a little bit more pipe to run it that far, and possibly a slightly larger pump, but maybe that's not even a consideration. And to the point about the specifics of the system, we haven't even got close to designing something like this. We're at the schematic phase, so it's possible that during the full-on design of this facility, we might find a solution that might be a little bit more economical, or gives us more flexibility of where to put it. So I think at this point, we've tried to identify a conservative cost for what this system might be to develop the budget appropriately. Exactly where it goes, it can be a flexible item at this point. And I don't see anything in front of us tonight that would prevent the septic system from working. So I think that's the biggest hurdle to jump.
Mr. Brzezinski indicated that we should avoid going up the hill. He said that is glacial till rather than the good soil that's down on the flat.
Yeah, and that we met with him months ago, and that was the same message that he's been consistent with. The further you go to the east up into that hillside, the worse it's going to get. So we've been trying to keep it as close to the building as possible, but until we actually have the access to the land and can really do a number of test pits to perk it, we don't ultimately know exactly where it's going to go. That's the best I can give you.
my other comments have to do with our other plans, so I'll wait till.
One thing that I would also, if you could expand upon, is we talked about right now there's a drainage pond, 3 drainage ponds illustrated in a general area. We discussed about whether or not the drainage area could be designed as something that would be a retention pond that, again, might serve some purpose for the golf course to be able to draw water from, and even have it to become a feature to the golf course as an actual pond with an aerator in it or something, so that you would have irrigation from surface water. And then also, Dick, you mentioned a couple times in the past few weeks that there had been a well on the property at one time before it was a golf course. So I guess that would indicate that there's probably the opportunity to put a well on the property. I'm sure you can't reconstitute the one that was there, because that was decades ago.
Yeah.
I think it demonstrates that there's an opportunity here to prevent a benefit to a golf course or something else that might have a surface water need on the property if the two uses or demands were merged. So, did you look into that possibility any further, or?
Yeah, that was something we're hoping to have the engineer have results for today about. I haven't been able to touch base with them yet. So that is still something that we're going to pursue in terms of feedback, information-wise. If it's feasible to do it, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't. This project site is going to need to drain the water, somehow get it back into the ground. And if there's a way to service the town and an additional benefit, I'd be happy to do it. You know, we did show an area that's a possible location, sort of a bean shaped one. Those little bubbles next to it would be what's called a forebay, which would be an area to help filter what's coming out of the catch basins in the asphalt areas, so that the drainage pond itself would be a cleaner material. There's also a little one shown a little closer to the fire station emergency drive, which is just a theory at this point. But when we start getting closer to the wetlands, that pond is actually still outside of the buffer zone, but when we get closer to the wetlands, we get in issues with buffer zone areas. And the other question I have out to the engineer is whether it's possible at this point to say whether the drainage that we've shown on this plan will be able to satisfy 100% of the drainage of the site, or whether we're going to still need structured drainage under the parking, which hadn't been part of the previous iteration, but could be necessary at this point. So that's a consideration that still needs to be weighed in.
Brian,
Yeah.
can I make a comment? Backing up a second on the parking question, took a quick look at the zoning code. Parking for clients and customers is allowed by right in Res A and Res B's, which covers this. And I think, and I'm not sure, it's a question for the building inspector, but I think the setback requirements apply to structures. And so, as far as I can tell, I took a quick look, I don't see any limitation on parking setback. So that bought us a few more feet on the gravel parking lot. Again, it's a question for the building inspector, but it seems to me it's a possibility at least.
Right, our engineer looked at what could be done from the setback, and I believe David Carter is correct, it's 10 feet for parking.
Parking? Okay,
Yeah,
I didn't see that, but.
And, but he cited the parking area essentially within the limits of the setback for that purpose.
Yeah, if I can just clarify this once and for all. You know, it doesn't come under parking, it's buried in the landscaping section. It says that property has to have a 15-foot wide landscape strip on the front property, front yard, and all of the rest of the property can have a 10-foot setback for parking. So there you have it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Just wondered if the chiefs have anything they want to say. I know you both worked very closely with Jeff to make sure that this didn't impact the operational functionality of your facility, which was obviously a key requirement from our committee. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, or if you want to just go on record as being satisfied with this plan, or point out any potential issues that may come up down the road as we get into a full design phase. I just think it'd be important to air out any issues, concerns, or if you're fine with that, that's too.
No, the last site drawing that you have there that shows that driveway that goes across the walkway with that little strip there, the police chief and I both had a concern with that, with cruisers coming around the building and then coming into the traffic with emergency vehicles exiting on the fire side, which basically we have that problem right now. So that's why that front driveway was proposed, so the police cruisers could go out around the front and share the emergency access with us and have better sight lines for the fire apparatus exiting out of there. So that's the reason why we changed that and kind of put that parallel drive along the public way to kind of separate that out a little bit. But as far as I'm concerned, it works for what we're looking for right now. So I don't know if the police chief has any other concerns with that.
Communications and the cooperation's been very strong. Hats off to Jeff and Donovan Sweeney. They've, oftentimes I think that we hit a wall and they come up with something, so satisfied.
I have one thing that came to mind with this plan, and then we addressed it briefly at one of your meetings, was whether or not the emergency access point and the public access points on 85 could be shifted to the south any further. And I noticed here that you have, I believe, there's a wetland area drawn out here, and it's my understanding that you have a certain threshold that has to be maintained in terms of not exceeding a certain square footage of wetland impact before you enter an Army Corps review jurisdiction. Do you have an understanding at this point of what, if any, wetland impacts there are with this, and if none, is it possible to move this just a little bit southerly? I think doing so would make a straighter shot for the fire department to come out, for example. It would also provide a little more flexibility to the loop road so as to soften that turn. The presumption with this loop road is, at least from our standpoint, is that it would most likely be one way, with this being the entry point, so that when the buses came in for a school, they would be able to side up to the school with the bus entrance, bus access on the school side. So there's two things that we could do with that, is if we could shift these access points down without creating a whole other set of hurdles, and also soften the turn.
Yeah, I know what you're getting at.
Here. We're talking about is taking these 2 points here and just moving them this way, and then doing something with this turn so that it's not so abrupt, so that it's a better,
Right.
It's
a hockey stick right now.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
we could try to make it not that.
Yeah.
And
it's certainly,
admittedly, this is a hand-drawn sketch on top of an aerial photograph, so
right.
I think we can do certainly a lot better when we get into engineering drawings.
Yeah.
I would say that there probably are ways to make this a smoother transition without necessarily shifting the driveways further south. But certainly moving the driveways further south would give us more flexibility. The reason that the public safety group chose not to do that and to limit us to the existing culvert is that even though we would have the flexibility within the wetlands restrictions to extend a new culvert, make a new driveway, it costs money to do that. And we wanted to avoid additional costs at that point. So the public safety group made a decision to not spend additional money and still get something close to what they needed. And I think for all practical purposes, there's no really issue. The chief can speak for themselves, but I don't think there's much of an issue coming out in an emergency with where the driveway is now. But I do think the more we work on this in the next stage of design, we can soften that curve and we can make it a more flowing roadway towards the school. Especially, this is drawn as two-way right now. If it actually is a one-way drive, that's certainly going to reduce the width of that road anyways, give us even more flexibility.
Well, there's
So I
that,
think
but also, with the parking coming off of that drive, it sets up for delay if someone's pulling in or pulling out of the space, and you're going to back up, and you don't want to have people backing up onto the street, so the easier you can make it to get around that road, the better. So even if it is one way, I would recommend that the road be larger than what the standard allows for, just so that you provide the circulation and facilitate that. The last thing you want to have is buses backed up on 85 in front of the emergency access.
Yeah, I may not, maybe the driveway part that comes up from 85 to generally before the parking area might be able to be reasonably one-way size, which gives you that flexibility. Then once you get to the parking, you open it up so you can have somebody backing up and somebody else can get around it. I think there's enough flexibility there with that maneuver to handle it. But from a public safety standpoint, in their committee standpoint, in terms of the cost, I think I'd prefer to keep that culvert where it is and not enter into the wetlands area.
This, speaking of the wetlands, this may be a Concom question, but you're here, so I'll ask the question. Because it's the stream is a tributary and it's a water supply for the public water system, for the reservoir, public water supply, excuse me. Would it be harder to shift over closer into the wetlands? I know that you can fill a percentage of wetlands, I can't remember the exact square footage of what it is, but because it flows into and it's a tributary to the public water supply, does that cause any concerns? Again, you may not know, but...
We actually had a plan that showed just that, and we
Okay.
went to conservation,
Yeah.
And staff, and in a preliminary, informal way,
Yeah?
discussed it with them as the possibility of doing it, and generally, yes.
Okay, perfect,
But
thank you.
the decision was that it wasn't worth the cost and the trouble to get there.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The design of this loop road does assume that we are going to get approval from the trustees of St. Mark and Fay who would approve us taking this land from Choke Field.
The chair of the school.
Yeah, there's three of them, so it assumes that two of the three would be in favor of it. The deed restriction on the choke field says that the land is to be used for the playground and children of the town, something to that effect. So we've asked the Recreation Commission to give an opinion as to how that will affect the enjoyment of the field. That'll happen tomorrow. I think that the proposed amount, which is 35 feet or less of encroachment, my assumption is that it doesn't affect the enjoyment of the field. If anything, it may result in the relocation of the Boy Scouts project obstacle course that was put out there, but I'm not even sure that it affects that.
That, in effect, is a net benefit to the choke field because you're providing additional parking as well. And there's another illustration that, if you look at the whole view, it demonstrated that you could actually repurpose the paved parking and court space that's on Choke Field now into just court space or additional field space. So,
Whatever the need would be. Yeah.
yeah, whatever that was determined by the powers that be on that.
Yeah. So I would hope that they would be, I mean, I guess I can't speak for them. I think that they would be in favor of it. I don't think there would be any, I think the Recreation Commission would be in support of it. There's a basketball court there now that's used a lot that we can't really improve because of parking and plowing and traffic. And so we might be able to do something there that would also improve the recreational use of the field. So I think all things point to the fact that it would work. You won't know until they have their say.
Yeah, I would say, I would make a comment that this plan enhances the use of Choke Field. Very little of it taken away. I would not support putting a building of any sort on Choke Field. As has been suggested, I think it would completely devoid the spirit of that agreement, which Mr. Cipriano interpreted, if you will, in his letter, that it's to be used as a playground for the children of Southborough in perpetuity. Taking a little bit of it is one thing, but plopping a building down right on Choke Field, I think ruins the spirit of that agreement, and I would not support that at all. One question I do have, though, has the building changed in any way?
No, the footprint of the building is the exact same. It's just been, as was mentioned, it's been flip-flopped.
Okay.
And then, sorry, go ahead.
So the areas that are outlined with all the darkened paving is part of the project?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, the idea, though this hasn't been discussed specifically with the Public Safety Committee, but the idea was that we essentially weren't, the public safety project may or may not start the loop road discussion. It's for somebody else to decide that. So we essentially cut the parking off that black zone right prior to extending that loop road idea.
But
So
that
that
part-
this
that-
project could be done as a standalone, and then if the town wanted to extend and actually connect and do more work on the loop road idea, as your committee has suggested, that connector can be made between the two.
But you would be building, the town would be building both access ways
Yes,
and the first strip of
right. We
parking
need,
as
public
as
safety
part of the
needs,
public parking for the public safety.
that is true. Because of the training room, public meeting room through the public safety facility, they will be holding training sessions there with other departments that can hold, a number of people. And so they have a need of 25 public spaces for that type of facility. So this is going to satisfy that need.
Brian?
Yeah.
So sorry I got picked late. I'm just trying to understand the intent of the site plan for ADOT. And it's omitting a bunch of the golf course details that were on the previous plan that we had, and maybe already discussed this. So this was done to figure out if the siting of the public safety complex could work in conjunction with the golf course, and that's the intent of that road going behind it, showing the gravel parking lot. Is that right?
Yes.
There's that tiny little square, that hashed out square, is that the same footprint as the existing clubhouse? Is there enough room there?
It's the same footprint, but different location.
Sure.
It would be relocated.
Yeah, it has to be,
Yeah.
there's a giant public safety located on it. But,
I don't think this shows the existing location of the pro shop anymore. I think that was taken off.
okay.
The gravel parking lot is the similar size to what's there, and the clubhouse is similar size to what's there. So it was just relocating them at the same size that they exist today. So if it were to be pursued, they may not be the exact same size. I guess there would be a decision for that time when it's done.
Yeah, it looks like, I'm just wondering, because it looks like it's really close to that 200-foot, what was that?
The corner,
Buffer
of the,
around
corner,
the
the
green,
corner
I
of the
think.
building is
Yeah.
200 foot.
Yeah, so I was
No
wondering.
windows in that corner.
Or plexiglass, maybe, I don't know. But, yeah, bulletproof, yeah. But it's roughly the same size. That's why it looks like it's
Yeah.
really tight there. So the clubhouse is the same size.
We almost went with just creating a bubbled area showing where one could go, but so we had something that was really hard lined, and then we were talking about going to the bubble. But you have to show, we arrived at just showing what's already there on property and just moving it.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I just want to make sure it's the same. And then why the gravel parking lot? The existing one is paved, but why is
Is
this
it paved?
gravel?
I thought it was gravel.
No, it's paved, yeah.
Oh, okay. That's
It's supposed to be,
okay.
okay.
It's really not meant to provide any detail as to what it might look like. So
But this
I think it was my mistake. I instructed them to label it gravel because I thought it was gravel. So.
Okay, okay, thanks. But this proved out with the public safety and architect that this could all work here with the adjustments that's been made to the original plan.
We also had some buy-in from the citizens petition, Save St. Mark's Golf Course Citizens Committee, is that correct?
Yeah, I understand it. I congratulate you and your consultant. I mean, it's an amazingly creative solution in an incredibly short time. I mean, I just never anticipated anyone could come up with something so creative so fast. It's amazing. I mean, talking about a selling tool, pictures worth 1,000 words. I would point out that, at the end of Woodward School, you have a loading dock.
Yes.
Which is not shown, which is there. You can see it engraved.
Well, it's
a great big
It's there, but it's not, again, we haven't spent any time trying
Yeah,
to
no, I understand.
make everything work.
I think that, the location of the golf parking is absolutely ideal because you don't need lighting for golf.
We don't have any lighting there presently. It's usually by sunset, we're out of it.
Yep, Al?
It's just getting dark.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. First off, I want to compliment you. I think this is actually a brilliant plan.
I don't say that about many things.
Should we be worried at?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe there might be a stroke or something, I'm not sure. When I saw this, I said, wow, that's really a good idea. I have a couple of questions. Have you actually talked to the schools about this?
I don't believe there's been any formal discussion with the school committee. There have been independent discussions.
I did get an email in the past week from the superintendent of schools asking when we're ready to come present to the school committee.
My advice, regardless of what I think about the public safety building, is do that ASAP.
No later than the night before a town meeting, but I encourage that we do it sooner.
Yeah, I would ask them to hold a special meeting, because,
I think there's been enough individual conversations with various members of the committee that all seem to think it's a great idea. As a matter of fact, I had one conversation last night during a workout with somebody who happened to be on the committee, and the response was yes, yes, yes. So,
I think that improving the flow there is a major concern.
we had heard that in our deliberations, and so as I say, I think this is an excellent concept. The second question I have, and I realize this is, there's quite a bit of work to be done to reconfigure the golf course. And has anybody put together an estimate of what it might reasonably cost?
Okay. Well, Dick can speak to the 3 minutes.
I think it's on your new website, isn't it?
It is.
So,
Yeah, and by the way, we lucked out because, Andre Forget, who's an expert golfer, is on our group, and he's retired and he happens to be an expert computer whiz. So he created this web page in like 24 hours flat. It's totally incredible. But anyway, you speak about this.
Just so everyone understands, there is a separate website.
I've seen the website.
Okay. Not to
I've
say,
seen the estimate.
not to save our heritage, but the golf course itself has its own website as of last Friday, I believe, right?
And
it
it's
has
essentially hot off whatever it is.
It has
But we
a
have
surprising amount of information
discussed this.
available.
Wilson, he's not here because we're going to another meeting in about 10 minutes. Said like 300,000, to do the greens and the tee. And that sort of stuff is doable. But, the golf club's all extra, parking's all extra, driveway's all extra. But you're talking 200-300, right? Isn't that right?
That's, yeah.
To do the regrading, but you've got to put the septic in first. And by the way, we're not tonight, we don't have time. But another issue which we're somewhat concerned about is closing this operation, the golf club. You cannot close a golf club for like 2-3 years. You're going to lose all the players, all the teams, all the da-da-da. You can close it for 1 year. So we were thinking just conceptually, Wilson is going to presentation, just think about the issues whether, could you just concentrate all your pre-construction work on the golf course site, the septic, the pipes, God knows what else you have to do. And then it's closed for a year. And then after that, just conceptually, you could put a fence up at the south end. You could redo a temporary golf course. It'd be a temporary green, a temporary tee. You'd reduce the fees. We discussed this with New England Golf and so forth, and possibly could be done. But you can't close the thing for 3 years because you're just going to be a problem.
I mean, let me add before I go. Actually, have to go
Can I
to the
say
meeting.
something on that?
You can. I just want to add something before I go. I think that the costs are going to be significant. I think we know from the presentations that the golf course needs work as it is, drainage-wise, stuff like that. The costs to reconfigure are going to be significant, and I don't even think that includes, either moving or rebuilding a clubhouse, that type of thing. And then there's a lot of things to consider about that closure of the course or how it's going to work during construction. I think the point of all this, what we're doing today, is that there's a very good design out there that if that should be the path that the town wants to take, it very well can be done. And there's a good design for it. But I just think all of those are separate issues for
Okay,
another
the only
day.
point I wanted to make about closing the list.
So
You
please don't
can't
take
just
over.
abandon the greens and not give them water, or, you know what I'm saying? Oh, we'll have no greens, 2 or 3, there'll be nothing there. So virtually what it's gonna cost to do 1 green, we'd have to do 9.
I
Even
guess
the year is
the-
down, we'd have
the-
to
the-
irrigate some of it.
The question that I had was, I think we need to be cautious here. If the town owns that this is gonna be done, it's just a word of caution, I actually would like to see us, we can save the golf course. If the town does this work, it's gonna be done under public sector construction rules, which mean, it sounds to me like Kentucky Windage, this is a 7-figure job to reconfigure the golf course between, the new clubhouse, the parking lot, the paving, and reconfiguring the tee. It's rough orders of magnitude, it's 7 figures.
There hasn't been a lot of discussion about how to build, renovate, reconfigure the golf course, primarily because it's not part of the budget that's being
Approved, yeah.
And as far as, there's also a lot that needs to be determined, just in the discussions that we've had with the selectmen about this concept, is that how the town would go about owning and operating a golf course. And I don't think that there's a lot of support to actually set up an operation from scratch versus doing what St. Mark's is doing already, and that is to have a management company come in and golf course. The thing that is of interest to our committee in keeping the golf course is that it is a holding strategy, be it short-term or long-term, that's of no cost to the town. Because the management company is the one that's responsible for maintaining the golf course, and if you maintain the golf course, you maintain the property. If you don't have a golf course, then you're incurring costs to maintain the property, even if it's to be maintained as open space. There's funds that will be necessary on an annual basis in order to maintain it in accordance with whatever standards that are set for the property under that sort of restriction. So we think it's an effective way to hold the property, if you will. Again, be it for long-term work or until it's the time that the golf course is determined not the best thing to do. So one thing that could be done, and I'm not familiar with the economics of what a golf course management company would be willing to pay, but you could actually bid out the management in some sort of barter arrangement where the management company is actually taking care of some of those renovations in exchange for reduced rent or payments.
It could happen.
So if you entered into a 5-year contract and the contract was worth, just for example, $100,000 a year, and you gave them the right to manage the property for 5 years without any rent, provided that they did this, 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 and this, that might be one way of funding, partially or fully funding the improvements in order to keep the golf course running. And that work could be done simultaneously with construction of the public safety complex. You wouldn't have any downtime.
Right.
And you could even do that in phases too. It's
Right.
just a matter of relocating the holes now and get a temporary pro shop just so you can keep the place running. And then simultaneously or subsequent to that, there's a whole other initiative about the pro shop.
We were thinking in terms of even a temporary green, okay, which, like on number 9, instead of going where the septic is or whatever, we shorten up, there's a rock out there. And it wouldn't be good, I mean, we cut the fairway, put a hole in. Now, the only thing with doing all of that, if the company's gonna come in and bid and we don't have anything, I don't know where all that, how you line all of that up, okay? You put it out for bids, and we don't have a pro shop, we don't have a parking lot, we don't, it gets complicated. But if we don't do that, and we don't have to do as much as we do now, the greens still have to be watered to some degree, and some fertilizer. I mean, we water them every day, that probably wouldn't be necessary because you'd leave them long. You would have to cut them every day. probably once a week, we'd have to cut the greens. Fairways, you wouldn't have to cut them much at all, but at some point, they'd still have to be cut, not to let them grow wild.
Well, what I,
That's the problem I see with shutting down. We don't want it to grow, and then we have nothing, okay, if it comes to that. But, you know, we have to find out if we're gonna do the golf course, obviously, first, before we get into all of that.
So if I may, getting back to the funding, to reconfigure the golf course, would that be something, warrant article for the annual town meeting? I mean, you can have all the plans you want, but you gotta pay for it.
Well, this is an issue because you already closed the warrant for any.
But it would, again, the golf course is gonna stay as is for this year.
Yeah.
Correct.
You know, even if this article,
Correct.
proposal that we have passes, we still need to do final design. We still need to get all the permits and approvals. We still need to bid it and award it. So I think the answer is yes, but it's the annual town meeting 2018 that we would need to address the issue. We don't need to address it now.
Okay.
but there just needs to be a, I think, at a minimum, there just needs to be, I don't want to say commitment, but there needs to be a direction to provide for
Right.
the forum to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And probably a separate committee and a whole
Yeah,
other
and it's a
thing,
whole
yeah.
construction sequencing,
Right.
you know, just to minimize the downtime for the golf course. Whether it's, you know, multiple construction contracts, a single construction contracts with constraints and milestones built in. There's people that are smart enough to figure that all out, and, you know, the only way to get them to do it is to approve Articles 1 and 2, so set those people to work.
Correct.
So,
Any other questions from the committee? No. Okay, if you could just say your name and address, please.
Deborah Cantor, 7 Lattice Corner. It's not clear to me, if you could just clarify, on this picture, how does one get access to the gravel parking lot?
It comes off of the loop road in between the school and the public safety committee. You'll see that there's a
Yeah.
parallel lines drawn, the S curve that goes to the golf course.
Okay, so that means that one has to enter the Woodward driveway, past
The public safety.
past the school?
Well,
No.
a lot is still to be worked out, but presuming it's a one-way road, you would come in and the public access in front of the public safety complex and then take a right onto the driveway that would lead to
Yeah.
the golf course parking lot.
Yeah,
If it was two-way, then you would be able to come in from both sides to access the
I
golf
see.
course.
and the public safety folks don't mind sharing that road with?
Well, it's not the access point for the police and fire
Right,
vehicles. It's just the public access that would serve that complex,
oh,
plus the school, plus the golf course.
I see. I see. Where it says emergency,
That's for,
I thought that was only supposed, you were talking about that being one way only.
no, that's for the police and fire.
Only,
Access to only.
two-way.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
I mean, it's not to say that it couldn't be both of them could be two-way, but the thought was that the northern, or the existing driveway access to Woodward
Yes,
doesn't provide for a lot of runway, if you will, on 85 south
Right.
of Route 30. So
Right.
you can alleviate the comings and goings at that point and making it one-way,
yes.
and might help traffic flow in general area.
Also, I thought that historically there was some concern about the Woodward entrance being overburdened already, right? So,
So that might alleviate, it'll alleviate on one path, but if you're adding, you're adding traffic to it as well. It would need to be studied,
thank you.
for sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Crescetti, can I ask you a question? So if by chance during construction, the golf course could not be open during that time, how, in your opinion, would that possibly affect the future operations of the golf course? because that's kind of an uncertainty at this point, so.
Well, yeah, okay. One of the problems is we have about 6 leagues, okay? And I don't, okay. I don't think we can say to the 6 leagues, we're not gonna open up for 2 years, or, you know, they're gonna go somewhere.
Yeah.
And my concern is they may not wanna come back. It's gonna be hard for them to find somewhere to go. And if they do find it, I don't know if they'd come back out of sheer loyalty or what would happen. So you would have that problem. Golfers, I don't know if it would be that bad, because they would play and they probably would come and give us a shot. My main concern is actually taking care of what's there now. All right. If we don't have, I mean, I work for New England Golf, but I'm not talking for them because obviously it has to go out to bid from the town. But if all their equipment pulls out and, you know, nobody's taking care of it, then we're going to lose what we got there. All right, greens are like $50,000 a piece. All right, we don't want to lose, we're going to lose one anyway in the transition. Actually 2, because I'm giving up the putting green, by the way. We're not putting one in on this section, I'm not figuring to do it. I don't want to see the other 8 not being taken care of.
Yeah.
So at a minimum, we'd have to probably water them 2 or 3 times a week. And we would leave them long. At some point, maybe we cut them once a week. Fairways, we'd leave it extra long because nobody'd be playing. But there again, you still got to cut sometime. Probably in the spring more than, you know, during the summer because it doesn't grow as fast.
Right.
But yeah, it's kind of, I mean, I don't know how you put it out to bid. I guess that's what I'm saying, unless we got some kind of.
Right.
I don't know, one of the things that was mentioned was they could come in, all right, the current revenue was $31,000 to St. Mark's as it is. All right, if you had put it out to bid and you said, okay, we're not gonna charge you the $31,000 this year, but we don't, you know, we really don't have all the greens, we have a temporary tee here and a partial hole there, it probably can work. I don't know whether they take it or not. It would depend on the circumstance.
Well, absent your concern about maintaining your client base, I mean, you could structure a management contract where maybe it is open for a year, but they're responsible for maintaining it during that year. That doesn't, again, that you run the risk of losing customers that way.
Yeah.
That is another way of.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot that needs to be worked out. With how to,
There is a tremendous amount.
yeah, and it's not something for our committee to determine.
No, no.
All we can do is illustrate that it can happen.
We don't even have, it through town
And
meetings.
and I think what you're hearing from us is that we think it should happen.
Yeah.
You know, so it's
I understand.
yeah, the rest is gonna be,
Yeah.
I would imagine they have to set up a separate committee, study how to, you know, get the right people on that, determine what the needs are, come up with a scope and budget, and a plan of action for funding.
You know, I know we have neighbors here, and I had said at one of the other meetings, it might even be possible for a year's time to come across through the driveway. And I don't know if we go into that gravel parking, or whether we could park, you know, somewhere over in the area where we have the clubhouse or something like that, might work. And stay out of the way of all the construction. Basically, it was fenced, everything would be south of where you're going. I think the only real thing there would be the septic system. Okay, I'm not sure exactly where it's going. But even that, we can have the green short of the septic system and the T short of it temporarily. Not the best setup, but it could kind of work.
Thank you.
I would respectfully suggest that waiting until April of 18 to make decisions about funding of the modifications for the golf course would be a serious mistake. And that it would be too late. And that a mechanism to resolve that much earlier is highly desirable. Hopefully, it should be part of the design process of this building, even if it is funded separately. We're going to have bulldozers there anyway. And, you know, because I think minimizing the downtime on the golf course is actually essential to maintaining it as a viable enterprise. And, you know, there seems to be a strong desire to maintain it as a viable enterprise that, you know, you've got to make it a business that works. And, you know, losing your customers for a year is not a business, it's not a good business decision.
Thank you.
So you, just to be clear, you're suggesting that even though it would be a separate initiative,
Separately
funded, it would make sense to perhaps bid it out as part of the contract for the public safety complex?
Assuming it's approved, yes.
So I agree with that. I think it's a complex project enough without, and then when you add in trying to manage the golf course construction and trying to get things sequenced the right way, I mean, it seems hard to do if you don't have funding for it when you're planning to do the construction and getting the detailed design for the public safety. So.
Well, I'm presuming you had all of your ducks in a row and actually had a layout and specs that can be bid out, then I believe you have an owner's rep that is in your budget, a project manager. So they could potentially bid out the work with the bidding of the public safety complex as an alternate. Is that how it would work?
It would be two separate contracts.
Two separate contracts.
Because you would not want to bid out site work for the building project. Chapter 149 is building, would be under a different chapter for flat work. Essentially, you want lower prices for that stuff.
But you could, there'd be some efficiencies both in terms of, I guess, in the construction, general conditions, other items that would.
Well, if we
was
were bidding
built as
them
a
out
separate project.
at the same time, but under separate contracts, the design team could take advantage of that structure and bid certain aspects of the public safety side, the septic system, other essentially flat work pieces of the project to a separate contract and leave the more hard construction of the building and the property around the building to a general contractor for that project. So we'd have two contractors to manage and we'd have to coordinate, but those processes could be done at the same time.
Well, just one follow-up. So you would have to bid the two projects separately. You could very well end up with two separate site contractors on the job, or it would be possible.
Ultimately, you would. You definitely would. And the reason I suggest it as an option is because there's significant amount of site contracting work in a golf course. And I would be a proponent of divorcing that from the building contract work, because it's just not economically a good idea, because you're going to be paying a lot more for that site contract. But you can't give all of the site contract work to the one guy, because there's certain things that have to be done around the building that the general contractor building needs to have concrete control over.
Right.
And if it's a different contract with a different contractor, the town is going to be the one trying to keep the two guys working amicably. So we have to find a nice clean line where the two entities can join their work together. Like digging two halves of a tunnel, they got to come together at the middle and meet. We got to find a good place for that to happen that makes sense on the site. And I think it potentially could be a good strategy, if that's the way the town wants to do it.
Well, quite frankly, I see that every day in my line of work, where, as a matter of fact, we're bidding on half a dozen jobs where that's exactly what is happening. You have a school being built, which obviously requires a lot of site work for athletic fields that are adjacent to the school. The overall site contractor for the school can take the base, if you will, for the athletic fields to a certain point, and then the so-called experts, that come in for the rest of the drainage work associated with the field. So the parallel that I'm trying to draw is, the contractor for the public safety building could take the site work associated with the greens and tee boxes to a certain point, and now your expert comes in. I'm sure there's a certain level of expertise that it takes to build a green, especially as it pertains to the drainage, the type of soils. That's where your expert thing comes in. So I see that all the time in my line of work.
I think there's a number of ways the town can choose to pursue it once the design is brought to a more
I think the
detailed.
key point you're making is that one can't get in the way of the other.
Right.
And so, or more specifically, a golf course can't get in the way of getting the public safety
Correct.
complex built. That's not to say that they can't be managed as one project, be they through separate contracts or not. But again, all this is based on a lot of ifs.
And I guess my point was, you need to.
Yeah, timing
need
is key. In order to keep it open, we're gonna need, probably gonna need to phase it. So as Dick mentioned, maybe it's, temporary greens. The first year while the public safety complex is being built, the site work for the public safety complex could take care of the roughing out of the areas, the rough grading of the areas where improvements and restoration work would be done for the golf course. And then the other project the other contractor could come in from there and do the other work. I'm sorry.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kate Burke from Birchwood Drive, 14 Birchwood. So I heard the conclusion that waiting until 2018 to fund the golf course is not a good idea because of the complexity of coordinating everything to keep the golf course from overgrowing. So that was one point. The next point is the cost of the golf course is a seven-figure number potentially in terms of what that number would look like. And then the third thing I heard is that maintaining the course as a golf course may only be temporary for a while into the future if the needs of the town change and it would be repurposed into something else. So would there be an appetite, do you feel, to spend seven figures and do all this work and then change the golf course? Because to me that seems like a lot of money to spend, up front and then to change it. And how would that fit with the notion that has been presented in the with the golf course warrant about having a conservation restriction on that land? Because for me, and I happen to be a writer of warrant 4, is we're interested in a conservation restriction in perpetuity, forever, that this land will be forever not to be developed on. So that is that's the conversation that's going on around town, which is to spend the money on the golf course, but then to change it versus to put that land into conservation forever at the get-go.
My comment about future uses was nothing more than to point out that any use is still to be determined. So a lot comes down to what is voted on. If 1, 2, 3, and 4 are voted on, then that's the direction that's been set. So absent that, our committee is supposed to be looking at a lot of what ifs. So when I characterize something about the property and its future uses, it's only to support the fact that that's our charge. And so I'm not indicating that we think it should be repurposed at a later date. I'm just merely pointing out that absent anything else to this point, it's subject to what the town decides it wants to do.
No, and I appreciate that. My comment was just more that to talk about future uses and to preload with the golf course as really the plan of action to be determined sooner than 18, that is not congruent thinking.
No, I agree.
And I believe voters are looking for congruent choices.
Dick, if I may, I know Mr. Soto's already done lots of work pro bono, but would it be worth a phone call just to ask him for a ballpark? I mean, since that's his area of expertise.
On putting in the greens.
What it would cost to do the work, to reconfigure the.
Yeah, basically, that's what we submitted in our in our budget thing that we submitted. Okay, we didn't do the building, we didn't do the parking lot. The work for the greens and whatnot, it's in that budget.
Which is how much? I mean,
About a couple $100,000, I think.
so I'm confused when Al, when you say it's seven figures,
If you talk about, because it's not just greens,
right?
it's also a building,
Yep.
it's a parking lot, it's paving to get to the parking lot. So, and.
But Al, to your point, and I don't know if you probably get there eventually, but when St. Mark's owns it, it's a private entity, the cost structures are very different than when the town owns it, and it's a municipal property, and we're now subject to public bidding laws. You add another 30%, on top of that.
I think you're being conservative.
I understand.
No, I think 30% is more like a factor of two.
Excuse me, Mark, just for the camera. can I
I'm
just
sorry,
have this,
Mark
sorry.
Purple, Town Administrator. So,
Thank you.
but there is a significant difference. I mean, when I was in Ashland, we built a pavilion, very simple pavilion, bathrooms, a little snack shack, and an area to have picnic tables under. Nothing big. It was $400,000. Okay, more than it cost to build a single-family home in a lot of instances. So, it is very expensive public construction, and that's the difference once we own the property versus a private entity like St. Mark's own.
Our committee has other business and interest
No,
of,
yeah,
so I just wanted to
absolutely.
see if there's anything else that,
One final thing, was someone else raise their
Oh,
hand
sure.
in the audience? Let's
Thank you.
just see if it has something that you
Sure, I'll
can
try to be
answer.
quick. Vincent Valvo, 7 Lattice Palmer Road. So, first of all, I think you've done a pretty marvelous job on this, so congratulations there. But I hear a lot of confusion in sort of some of the details and aren't quite ready yet for public consumption. For example, the actual location of the greens, the actual ones, the greens, the new, tees and such, the grading, the wetlands that are gonna come into play, the septic that's gonna come into play, the cost, we don't know. There are several unknowns, and it would seem if we go to the town meeting with a lot of these unknowns, it's gonna be very problematic. I would recommend getting as much information as you possibly can. Otherwise, it sounds like there's too many unknowns for it to be viable. You just don't know what you're going to be voting for. So unless we get some hard, pretty close to hard facts, I think it's kind of suspect.
To that point, I know at the beginning of the meeting, we talked a little bit about the communication strategies. When you're working at the transfer station, I didn't know if maybe our committees could collaborate on how we could even have a greater impact. I hate to say the F word, but Facebook pages do have some effective.
yeah, so our committee, we made a motion, although members of the committee didn't really think we had to make a motion to authorize the chairman or any designee to publish any of our factual information that we already have widely published on the town website, because I think we share the same view, is that many people aren't clicking 5 pages into the town website, they're opening their Facebook page, so we plan to be very active in that fashion. We ourselves don't have a Facebook page because we are an appointed committee of this town, but we do have access to fire and police to just publish facts, as well as the townhouse. So that's one of the things we're doing, but I think the more we can get the facts out there and collaborate, the better. The other thing I can suggest is, those of you that have seen our brochure at the transfer station, if after tonight's meeting you think that one of our panels should be repurposed to talk about some of the items that you're working on and have it be a joint brochure, I'm happy to send you the template and let you play around with some of it.
Mm-hmm. But I agree with you 100% that, and I agree with you, that when I poll people, it's confusion is what they're expressing, and they just don't have answers. And they have a short window in order to get that information out there. So I think we could come up with a more effective strategy and discuss it further.
So, I mean, we're happy to meet jointly with you again, or if there's one or two members of your committee that want to work, you know, whatever we can do to help. And I'll publish to your chair every week what our schedule is, and hopefully we can attack it from multiple angles.
Or if you want to have more discussions while we're hanging out at the transfer station, that's always helpful.
At least it's not supposed to snow, so.
It's snowing right now.
I know, you know what, better now than Saturday with the
Yes.
transfer station, so.
It's really warm over there.
It is, it's supposed to be wonderful Saturday.
I would just add, if we're going down this path where we're trying to take this plan and provide the cogent choices, I think is what you said, right? And put some definition around the golf course side of things. That's something that we don't have the capability of doing. We need to rely heavily on Vic and his group to provide us with information so that really what ultimately the three groups would be working together to push this concept as part of getting the warrants passed. Essentially, the premise here is to get the buy-in of additional stakeholders and do it in a way so that it's mutually beneficial. But I agree, I mean, we're not going to have a step-by-step plan on reopening, modifying and reopening a golf course. But the question is, what can be put together between now and then that would actually give some definitions to how things might go forward? Because it's going to require time beyond, much time and effort beyond the special town meeting to fully design
A lot of these
changes.
what ifs, they're, you know, people want to, they want to know what they're voting for. And there's a lot of, well, we could do this and we could do that, but it's like juggling, you know, just keeping things up in the air until either they all fall down or they get caught by somebody.
Yeah, and we've taken those concerns, we certainly heard, we've heard quite frequently, and we've communicated those concerns to the selectmen that there needs to be some definition around what is the intent of you know, what's the fate of the golf course, what's the intent of the remainder of the land, what is the town, what are the selectmen prepared to do now as part of this, either this warrant or as part of the process, lay out the groundwork for a process that could occur post special town meeting, so that it provides some clarity as to what, at least what the intent is going forward. And it's gonna, you know, we talked about, it's probably gonna require setting up yet a separate committee to determine the specifications and layout and costs of what is actually going to be the golf course. And we can get some order of magnitude for what it could cost. We can have a couple of concepts as to how things might be done. But, you know, can we have, you know, what Dunham Sweeney's done to that level of detail in time for a special town meeting? No. I mean, that's not possible. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I just don't see how you could come to any sort of you know, final determination prior to that meeting unless there's some sort of commitment that's set at the town meeting.
And I think the important thing to remember is Articles 1 and 2 are to put the land in the town's control and deal with a well overdue need of the town. And then without that control of the land, all these conversations are really nice to have, but I think there's a balancing act, right? And I just want to go on record again commending the collaboration over the past week, because I think we all sat there last Tuesday night and heard the direction loud and clear from the Board of Selectmen, but no one really knew if it was actually going to be able to be accomplished before March 8th, not to mention 7 days later. But I think these committees have formed a very powerful, this is what could happen. I do think the more we can get the information, the better, but I do want to remind everyone that Articles 1 and 2 are to get it within control. Articles 1 and 2 were not to pass, right? That we've all heard what could happen, so just a careful reminder to everyone about that.
But I guess, all I can say is that we should continue the dialogue with the golf course group and
We
see
we
what
can
sort of
look
information
deeper
we're
into
changing.
different
Yeah.
things ourselves. And one of the things was whether we were gonna be relevant and have a place to go. Okay, with the new plan kind of sketches out it's possible.
Right.
So we can look in further
It
depth.
can happen.
But
It can happen.
it can happen, that's what I'm saying. Whether we can actually come up with, the exact figures it's gonna take, I don't know. Could probably get a better estimate. We're talking moving the clubhouse. I guess if we go back far enough on this, we never had a clubhouse. We used to have a 10-by-10 shed. So, it's possible. I'll do anything to keep the thing there and operating. Whatever we have to do, we have to do. And I don't know how that bodes with the customers. But I think everybody would rather have the golf course than have a nice clubhouse. All right, it's nice to have the clubhouse, but at the same time, it's the golf that's really the main thing there.
And again, also, just for myself, I think the use of the golf course is actually, it's something that almost needs to happen as a way of maintaining the property. Otherwise, you're incurring additional costs to own the property. So, if we, from my standpoint, I think it makes perfect sense to try to do something that works, that incorporates both uses.
Right, any further comment from the audience or public safety? I know you guys have a.
We'll be
continuing meeting as well.
recessing out into the lobby if anyone's interested in our
And
public
we're
meeting.
continuing our meeting, anyone's welcome to stay, obviously.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not an advocate for it, but we should I said, it is an option. It is a place you could go. That's the view options is things that are theoretically possible. It's a crappy idea. Yeah.
We don't even have permission to have the golf.
Well, I'm just saying,
No.
my comments are
It's gonna come down to the town meeting and what everybody says. Correct.
It is good.
Trying.
That's what we like.
Exactly.
I know you got it.
I know, yeah. I think I'm gonna probably have to get this finance. Anyway, I better go to another meeting. Unfortunately. Which I'm late, but I'm gonna go.
How are you?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jeff, does this become a water hazard?
That's what I'm thinking. Actually, the part about using it for water is not so far-fetched.
I was kind of
So
thinking
that
the
would
same
be
thing.
red stakes?
Chick-fil-A or something like that.
Well, even, it's kind of a scenic thing, water, yes. But that's one of the things, when we talk about wells, we were thinking of digging a retention pond anyway, have the well feed the retention pond. But I've often said we have the brook, but we don't have any real water hazards anyway. Of course, by itself. Most courses do.
We could make one, put some alligators in it.
Well, that's, it's kind of funny, because we were talking about putting in the wells, kind of went near the wetlands, we were thinking like, you can put a pond. And they said, no, you can't mess with our wetlands. But I thought we were expanding it. If you take a pond 20 by 50, you're making it bigger, not smaller. Anyway, thank you.
All right, guys, we're going to continue, the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. One of the things on the consultant update, I just wanted to bring up, and I had mentioned this to Brent earlier, that the two plans that we presented to the selectmen, I have some comments on those. I know we didn't have a whole lot of discussion that night. One of the things is on the, of course, I have it in front of me. Of course not. On the net buildable concept plan. You do have it, Jeff, thank you. You're much faster than putting it together for me. one of the things, I actually had a couple comments on that. Thank you, Joe. One of them was, it lists the total acreage is 58.8 and it's 60. So we're off an acre, 1.2 acres on that. I don't know where it's at, but that's one of my questions.
That's the gross area listed?
Yeah, right on the end of the legend, it says 58.8. Actually, can I borrow this?
Yeah.
Joe?
Could you just repeat what you said?
Absolutely. Under the net concept,
Net buildable area.
yeah, the progressive print.
Yeah. Net buildable diagram.
The net buildable diagram, the acreage is listed at 58.8 and it should be 60. So
Okay.
that's a minor comment.
Hopefully we're wrong.
Thank you, Joe. Also, at the selectmen's meeting, one of the things when the other concept plan, I can't remember the exact name of that one, and my next comment will reflect to both, actually. Nope, it was the white one. It showed the buildable with the white and the colors.
When you print it, it doesn't
Okay.
show white.
Okay, well, I'm just referring to the two.
No, I
Those
know,
were the
I
two,
know.
and when that one was put up specifically, I know we were asked if that was what a developer could build on that particular point. So my point to that is there's actually an easement that I think we need to reflect on there. It's almost 6 acres. It's a 50-year, I have copies of this, and I can forward this. I just pulled these up tonight. It's on the Mass Registry of Deeds. It's almost 6 acres for the septic easement. And here was an amendment done in 2003, and it's for 50 years. So I just did a quick figuring if it was a square versus, so it's a little bit more. It came out to like 5.54 acres. So it won't affect the town because we're municipal, but if the developer came in, that's 6 less buildable acres on the site. And I think to be fair, that needs to be
That should be
reflected.
listed, yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I'll forward these out. This is,
It's a septic easement?
it's a septic
Yeah,
easement.
it's from St. Mark's to
Yes,
town
the
center
town.
for Woodward School.
It won't affect the public safety building,
No,
but if we're gonna
if it doesn't
put
go-
everything out
If it
there,
doesn't go forward, then that stays.
then that stays, so
should be
that's
deducted.
6 less buildable acres. So I have that, I will forward
Okay,
those
great,
to
thank
everybody.
you.
And, that was already answered. That was already answered. And that was already answered. So, let me just look through. I had a couple other points, but that was the major point that I had. I was concerned, like I think our net buildable plan currently shows it as 36.5.
I'm adding just to make sure the.
Well, there's two things that I agree that we need to enumerate these things.
Yeah.
But even some of the categories that we've created doesn't foreclose the possibility of it being built upon. So just because there's a steep slope
Right.
doesn't
right.
mean that you can't do something in order to work homes
Right.
or something into it. But this is just a broad brush look that really, I don't even think you need a heck of a lot more information that you can get that's readily available to put on this to
Right.
show that the property has a lot of development potential.
Right, and I
And
don't.
I think that's all we're trying to use the map to show that, I think I mentioned at the selectmen's meeting, it'd be helpful if the town knew what it was buying from that standpoint. I think it's twofold. One, you want to support the fact that you're getting good value for the transaction.
Yep.
And two, you're underscoring the importance of preserving it and putting it in the control of the town.
Yep.
So I think that is the intent of that map. And from there, we can then look at the public safety complex and the other drivers on the concept plan.
Yeah.
But that's a great
I just
piece of
think there
information.
should
If there's
be-
more, I know that the title report made reference to that, but having that
Yeah, and I'll-
detail is helpful.
I'll
I think
scan
there was
it.
there were only 2 easements on the property.
Yes, I think there is too.
Yeah.
What was the other easement?
I think it was more of just a drainage or
Yeah.
access, yeah. for-
Yeah.
Actually, so when you add up the numbers, it comes to an even 59.
Okay.
Just for the heck.
Okay, so we need to fix a legend.
All right.
So, are we allowed to ask questions from the audience, or no?
Ask away.
I have a question. So, because your committee is looking at what to do with the rest of the land, and because the purchase and sale has been signed, do you now have access to the highest and best use document that was used with St. Mark's in the town to set the price?
It was the appraisal, it was
There-
the assessed value, wasn't it?
There were,
That's what, yeah.
all we have is what has been made public, and that is the appraisals. The land swap agreement is now a public document, so that was signed last Friday.
Right, but what's behind that?
And the discussions that have occurred in between there, I think it was described as you know, there are other things that affected which side of the ledger value went. You know, be it, you know, the 50% restriction. There's actually something of note that I think would be very helpful in the public knowing, in the land swap agreement. It had to do with restriction of the property.
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying.
And it wasn't just the fact that 50% has to, you know, can't be developed. There was, I don't know if I can find it quickly.
At least 50%.
The town can only use it for town purposes. So there was some concern that the town could turn around and sell off the property at a later date, and that's not possible. If that's restricted as part of this contract, that would be a deed restriction. Another thing in here is that it also says the restrictions itself would be worked out between the parties. So there's still an opportunity for the public to actually have a say in how some of those, you know, how those restrictions are defined. So there's been a lot of concern about the 50% developable, you know, so maybe there's an opportunity as part of that restriction to have some say into what that means. You know, I think the way when I read the contract, it tends to point to what is considered developable in accordance with the current land use regulations, which may not be good enough for people to feel comfortable with. But I think the thing to point out there is there's a couple other conditions in there that still leaves open the possibility for further definition of a restriction on that property.
Right. That's obviously what we're interested in. But I came here tonight specifically to know if you, because your committee is an appointed town committee and now we have a executed purchase and sale, that there, in any transaction like this, there would be an appraisal that would have highest and best use that would really stipulate and have, like, you know, a subdivision, or it would have it all what you were just discussing in terms of how much land was, you know, septic, and that already would have been done, and that would have been part of the documentation that was included behind the PNS.
We talked about that last week. There is a lot of people that are wondering about the appraised value of the land, where it came from. Brian Shea last week alluded to the fact that they were able to bargain with the town's assessed value of the land, which obviously is a lot lower than what it would be if it was a developer who, you know, with half-acre zoning up there, could put in a road and essentially get in 50, 60 lots. And the raw value of that land is a lot higher than what the town's assessed value is for that land currently. So it was to their advantage in bargaining that St. Mark's allowed that to be used as sort of a baseline.
But I've heard that question asked a few times of the selectmen, and the answers that I've heard have been slightly evasive, but the bottom line appears to be that they did not do a highest and best use appraisal by a certified appraiser and all that kind of stuff. And frankly, if I were negotiating, I would probably not want that out there for St. Mark's to see, although I'm sure they have estimates themselves about what that number might be. But now that the purchase and sale is signed, there's less pressure to not do something like that. But I don't know that anybody has done that.
Well, I don't think you can do it unless you have the soil tests done.
Well, but I'm saying somebody could go out and, you know, pay for some of that at least. And, but again, I don't know of anybody who actually has done that, and I've asked around a number of times myself about that.
So wouldn't that information be available now that the PNS is done? And wouldn't, because the negotiation was an executive session, wouldn't that now be available to the public?
Not necessarily, because the whole deal is not yet done, I think. I think they tend to keep that curtain up for as long as they can.
Okay.
And I think they're.
So the PNS sign it didn't
Yeah, I don't know, we could ask, certainly, anybody could ask them about it. But again, I think that, as Jenny suggests, someone could actually go out and do that assessment now, but it would cost some money to do it, particularly a thorough job with soil testing, that kind of stuff.
Because that's going to be essential, especially around the matter of the golf course and where the septic is placed, because if the land hasn't really been tested and we don't really know exactly where it can go based on those findings, then the placement of the golf course could become moot, because if you end up having to really move your septic for the school and for the building, then you might not be able to fit the golf course in there.
I think there is some information with respect to septic in that area, because it had to have been investigated when they built the septic field to begin with.
The health agent.
And also to determine the area of the easement, which is a 6-acre area.
Right.
So there is some soils information in that location. There's no soils information that we know of for the remainder of the property, other than the USGS maps, which would just indicate types of soils, but nobody's been drilling down to determine if it's one giant rock underneath there. That's what we're talking about.
I'm not sure how much there has or hasn't been done. I mean, the health agent, Paul Pasinski, who's been the health agent for 30 years or something, has been asked and has opined that there is good soil there for septic as long as you stay away from the high part of the property on the back toward Ladaswama up there. But his comment, apparently, I haven't asked him myself, but I've heard a couple of people comment. I think, Bill, you have.
Yeah, I've talked to him, he said that where we're talking, there's no issue.
Now, that's not perfect information. On the other hand, Paul has been doing this a long time and
Yes.
does have a very good feel for what works and doesn't.
And from a development standpoint, it is possible to do community septic on a property. If you found one area, and you could have everything put to that area. That's Wedgewood, yes, Wedgewood Estates has done that way.
As well as the condominium complex.
Thank you, I won't ask it. That was my main question for
You know, it's one of the first questions we had actually in our
Yeah.
meeting, because when you look at the term sheet, which is a public document, there's no dollars assigned with those bullet points.
Yeah.
And so you can't take a look at the appraisals that we have at least and say, oh, all right, makes sense. This is worth $6.5 million, and this is worth $1 million, and therefore it's, you know, there's a number of other factors that have been embedded in the transaction.
Like the adjacency for St. Mark's to have the land adjacent to their property versus,
Right.
just a lot.
It's confusing for people out there.
Yeah.
I agree.
You know, and there's also, you know, I think one of the bullet points is that you're getting the building, you're getting to stay in the buildings, you know, rent-free, but, you know, is it truly rent-free? Is it just, is that too embedded in the transaction?
Right.
So.
Yeah, and that's where people are having trouble deciding.
Yeah. So, you know, our committee is supposed to make comments and recommendations, or not, to the selectmen at least. And these are the types of things that we intend to voice to them, and actually already have started doing, such as you need to have some clarity as to what this transaction is about. What's come out of tonight's meeting, and what we've heard a few times now, is there needs to be a clear picture as to what the town wants to do with the property going forward, and that be it through warrant 4 or, you know, should the selectmen, as part of introducing their warrant, for example, have a roadmap presented as to this is what we would like to do as the next steps at post-land swap. Step number 1, set up a committee for the restoration of the golf course, and charge them to come up with a spec and design and budget so that funds could be appropriated for so that there's a business plan, if you will, for the continued operation of the golf course. You know, the open space, or, you know, provide some direction as to how the specifics of the deed restrictions are going to be defined. And who's going to be part of that definition?
Because they could, at that time, they could say that we would put the remainder of the land into a CR in perpetuity.
Well, there's, right now, we know from the land swap agreement and from the term sheet that half the property is supposed to be left, is now not allowed for development.
Right.
It's not determined in the land swap agreement, nor has it been explained to anybody what exactly that means, how you were going to achieve that.
Right.
And so we discussed in a similar fashion. We've got two ends of a spectrum here. We've got a public safety complex with the town having control of the property with the deed restrictions per the land swap agreement and nothing else. And then the opposite end is nix this public safety complex for this site, but go back and negotiate for the purchase of the property with 100% open space restriction in perpetuity. And there's got to be a middle ground in order for the first two warrants to be passed.
Right, because that's the key.
And so that's what we're trying to come up with through this master plan, and
yeah,
at least
the
to
public
show.
they know that the public safety guys, they know this because they know that their future depends on clarity.
Right, and the selectmen are buying in, now because they see that there's some clarity being put to what is the town going to end up with, and how can we get there, really? Because it's an important. There's many conditions that need to be determined, and the more that can be determined before the vote, the better. Yeah.
And one question I did not get a chance to ask Mr. Shea, maybe it wouldn't be appropriate to put him on the spot without his fellow selectmen, but someone could easily amend the warrant article on the floor.
Yes.
To put the conservation restriction as part of warrant article number 1.
And I think some of that's bubbling, as a matter of fact.
And I think I mentioned.
Frankly, I would be surprised if someone didn't.
Yeah. There's talk about doing that, Joe, from what I've heard. So I think Selectman Shea said at our last meeting, it can be done. I think he talked about the four corners of the warrant and how it can be done. There is a way. I don't personally know what that way is.
Well, we're having, all the people who are warrant writers, we're having a meeting on the 28th, I guess, where it's like a pre-meeting before the town meeting.
Yep.
And they teach you about amendments. I mean, I'm a counselor for my specialty nationally, and we have very formal rules about how you can, how your meetings are run and how you can amend or not amend and so forth. But I think when we look at the land and looking at your committee and the charge of the committee, I think the conservation restriction on the remainder of the land, it is so crucial. Otherwise, we're going to be all sitting around on our committees again, for the April meeting.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I agree.
I'd like to add
Go
just
ahead,
that I keep hearing this 50% number being thrown out, which means to me, and when I hear from everyone else, it means absolutely nothing because 50% of that land as it stands is undevelopable. So I'm not even sure why that number is even put out there. It's meaningless.
Well, nobody had the data when the number was produced, basically. So,
right, but it keeps being used as a selling point, and it's really not.
Yeah, I understand. I agree.
Yeah. Anyone else add anything further?
I was looking at this map again, I just had another question on it. The second floor. It looks like the complex was sort of rotated a bit to face 85 from the, and I'm doing a diff in my head from the plan we had shown at the selectmen, Tim, the plan you showed at the selectmen meeting, which is creating that tight.
It's been rotated away from it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's sort of, before it was sort of tucked up against the boundary to Woodward there. And this, it's rotated, counterclockwise, that makes it faces 85. And that's creating that tight space with the clubhouse and the 200-foot setback from the green. I was just wondering, is there a reason for that, Tim? Is there something that you guys were discussing with the public safety study?
Actually, we talked about that, but determined that, we have enough to work with for tonight's meeting. This is by no way the end of it, but I had a conversation yesterday that, this could be, for example, if it was rotated clockwise ever so slightly again, that would actually help the traffic flow of Loop Road and not create a pinch point for the proposed location of a clubhouse. You might even be able to slide it back even a little further.
Exactly. Yeah.
These are, these will get worked out.
Okay.
But I agree with you. I actually asked them to rotate it counterclockwise. I think they went a little too far. I was trying to get it so that it would be more of a loop road and not have this kind of bend to it. But
So that's good to hear. They're open to sort of
yeah, we're not
this is like
changing
a feasibility study.
we're not changing their, their project. We're
Yeah,
just
yeah.
moving it around here, here, and here.
Yeah.
So that the difference in costs, actually in some cases, it might provide savings if they can, take some of the cost here and make it shared.
Right.
Then maybe that reduces their cost
Okay.
as a project. So it's still work in progress, but Matt and Brian and I and Jeff determined that this is kind of good enough for the sake of discussion.
Okay. That's good to hear. Thanks.
Okay, so I will send out to everybody the easement and the map. I'll scan those tonight, so everybody can have those. So I guess administratively, anyone have anything else?
Minutes?
That's next, Sam.
If I may,
Absolutely.
I don't know if this is our charge or public building safety committee's charge, but I really agree with Al that getting in front of the school committee is really important. And would we see that as our charge to, at the very least, make a suggestion to the school committee, or is that?
I think we heard that they actually got an email requesting that they present to their committee.
Okay.
I don't know when the committee, I think the committee meets right now.
Yes,
I don't know if they're every Wednesday or I know they're meeting tonight.
So who communicated with who?
There's been individual conversations with certain committee members. School committee members with certain committee members here. There hasn't been any formal meetings or presentations.
Do you know if anyone's reached out to Choate, because they're, not Choate, Fay, because the trustees, there's three groups.
I
St.
don't know.
Mark's, Fay, and the
I'm wondering
school.
if that needs to be even, what if they nix it from the
Exactly.
beginning and this whole thing is a moot point?
Yeah.
The conversations, I would think, should be going on simultaneously,
Right.
because St. Mark's can't opine because.
Yeah, I agree with Lisa.
But I think simultaneously, if both are going on,
Mhm.
again, you're trying to alleviate people standing up on town meeting floor
Yep.
and saying these
Yep.
exact questions. I think that's the great thing about the diversity of this committee is these questions are coming up, so.
Yeah.
So we want to get a preliminary determination from the school committee and from the headmaster.
At least somebody reach out to the trustees today and,
So the question is, Tim, who communicates, or Lisa, I should say, the vice chair, who communicates that?
I would imagine we have to come through the selectmen. Any
I don't
formal
know.
discussion, no,
Yeah,
Sam?
we could do that. There's actually a regional school committee meeting tonight, which is not
Right.
the people we need to talk to. The Southborough School Committee, I think, met last week. Normally they meet like after town meeting, so I think somebody needs to talk to the superintendent and see if she's willing to call a special school committee meeting to consider something like
Jason was
this.
doing that already.
Okay.
They're having a discussion already because she had emailed him.
So we probably need to
So-
collaborate with them on.
But to Lisa's point, you
Yeah,
have
we ought to
the
attend.
Choate Field
Trustees.
trustees.
Yeah,
I think that process has to be started
I agree.
now. And who does that? Is that
Right,
also?
that's my question. Is that
Well, what are we looking for?
Paul Desmond
Is
is
it-
a trustee, he could
Paul Desmond is, that
activate the, make a request that the other trustees meet with him potentially.
might be one way of doing it.
I don't know that he's the chairman, I don't know that there is a chairman necessarily.
I didn't even know they were the trustees.
Paul didn't even know he was a
No,
trustee.
I've known that.
But Paul is, I think, supportive of the concept, so
Right.
if he's got some ammunition, my guess is he would reach out to the head of Fay and St. Mark's and say, let's talk about it.
Do you have an avenue to Paul Desmond?
I could certainly send him an email, yeah.
Or do you want to have Brian?
Or should, maybe Brian ought to do it as the chairman.
That's a good idea.
So Brian should call Paul and request that Paul have a meeting with their trustees, or
explore that, but the selectmen probably ought to be in the loop as well. They always get touchy when
I
St.
agree.
Mark's and Fay are
I
involved.
agree.
So maybe Brian talks with
Selectmen.
Brian, Brian to Brian communication.
Yeah.
And then the two of them talk with Paul and say, let's organize a discussion to see what people's temperature about this is about this. I mean, St. Mark's
Yeah,
is
it's a moot point.
likely to
It
be
is.
supportive, I would
They
think.
don't vote for it.
Yeah.
In terms of reorient it.
All you need is two votes.
Again.
well, can they vote?
Uh,
Or are they conflicted?
I don't know that there's any language anywhere that says they are somehow conflicted. I mean, I have no idea what the trust, original trust documents
So
say.
informally, we know we have one, if not 2/3.
That's
So
right, that's right.
just what can we get
And who
more
knows?
substantially between now and the town meeting?
I think that you could get an informal reading from them. And Fay, frankly, may have some interest. I mean, Fay is still hanging out there potentially in debt to the town through this Main Street project, because the town is actually going to fix a significant drainage problem they have down there at the corner of Parkerville and Main Street.
Yep.
So I have no idea how appreciative they may or may not be about that, but I think that the selectmen might be able to exert a little influence on that potentially. And frankly, Fay doesn't have as they say, a dog in this hunt too much relative to Coach Field.
At one point, they were looking at, I heard at one point they were looking at pumping over to the golf course themselves.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
As part of their master plan.
Yeah.
But then they were able to provide for it on site.
Yeah, Beals and Thomas did the analysis.
Yep. So we're going to approach,
But
Brian
again,
approach,
you don't know
Brian
the answer.
approach
Selectman Shea,
about the,
about starting communications with Fay.
yep, and
Well, with the trustees.
Well,
Trustees,
Trustees.
trustees.
and then prior to that, we were going to have a
Try to get an informal determination
determination with the school committee.
with all the trustees.
No, I mean, we were going to approach the school committee in addition to this issue.
Yep. Yes, I think either we and/or the Public Safety Committee, for the purposes of presenting to the school committee to gain their support. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that it? Shall we move on to minutes?
At some point tonight, it'd be good to let me know what we want to have uploaded to the site, new information. So whether it be 4 minutes, after minutes, whatever.
Let's do this now.
You want to do it now?
Yeah,
Because I was
administrative,
gonna, also, we need to start outlining what it is that we're supposed to be reporting to the selectmen. And then, as we found out at the selectmen meeting last week, and I believe through a follow-up conversation with Brian, is that there's a chance that they may wish for us to make a presentation at the special town meeting.
Yeah.
So, if that's the case, we've got work to do.
No, but I think the first point, I agree, Jim, is the message. What are we going to say?
Right.
And then I think there's other sort of boilerplate that goes around that. And I guess I would be inclined to start sort of from recommendations or summary or something like that. And do a draft of that and then work backwards from it
I
to support
agree.
it.
What did I say? A thesis statement, supporting statement, rather than building your support in order to come to a conclusion.
Right.
Because you'll never get to the conclusion.
Yeah, yeah. And, but also, if you sort of say, here's what we think as a summary piece, then that really clarifies the message. And again, if you try to do any more than that, 5 bullet points or something at town meeting, you get in deep trouble, I think.
Right.
So is the next step for somebody, some subgroup to take a whack at what that those summary points might look like and talk about that next week? It's a little premature, but.
I'm not so
I don't
sure
think
it's
it's
premature.
premature.
I think the reason for having the individual's notes and have those in a common format was so that they could be merged into, a report of some sort.
Right.
So maybe what we need to do is, you have the website set up for each input session. And some of the committee members have submitted their comments and observations and questions as a result of those input sessions. So maybe we could merge all the individuals' comments into one set of notes, questions, recommendations that we could approve, if you will, for this is our position with respect to that input session, and post that on the website for each input session. And then out of those, we can develop the outline for a reporting to the selectmen.
Do you suggest that maybe we break it down and assign 2 people to each input session?
Yeah, and certainly break up the work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
So we could probably do that now if we want to start taking a crack at it.
Yeah.
Isn't there 10 of us on the committee?
Yes.
And 5 input sessions?
But I think that's a useful step, but again, I think that out of that, we will have a number of points, but I think that I'd be surprised if that by itself led to a one page or one set of bullet point recommendations, if you will, that I think the selectmen and town meeting will be looking for. I mean, it's a good start, but I still don't think it's too premature to sort of take a whack at what that would look like, which will not be right in its first draft form,
Right.
but at least that gives people something to react to and say, wait a minute, that's not what I thought we were saying, or why'd you leave out X, Y, or Z, or whatever. So maybe those two things proceed in parallel.
Sure.
So Tim, were you suggesting that for each of the input sessions, we have a summary of the committee's responses or, thoughts on that session and important points from that session?
If we can. I mean, it may not be recommendations, but, certainly the notes of what people said.
Key points.
And the questions that may have arisen by us as the committee that we needed to get guidance on or include in a reporting to the selectmen.
Okay, yeah, so it's the key points
I
that
think
we
it's
want
the
to...
key points. I think there might be some that we won't be able to agree on in terms of conclusions and recommendations. So do you list them all, or do you don't?
I think it's useful to list them all, as much as is reasonable. And we do have the minutes that I think are a pretty good record of what happened in those sessions.
So that's what I'm trying to think through my head. What's the difference between, I guess this is a summary or distillation.
Not much, but
yeah.
I think there's details coming out in the notes of what the public has said to us that maybe didn't get fully reflected in the minutes.
Right.
I think, in order to recognize that, I think it would be helpful to have that out there.
I think it's a logical sequence to summarize, the input sessions, and then go from there in terms of recommendations from the committee. But I agree with Sam. It's got to start.
Yeah,
I mean,
I do.
It's somewhat happening, already. It's just not written down. I mean, we're
which is
essentially recommending
Yeah.
what it is that's on the plan.
Right.
But
We just need some
we
substance
need to know
behind
what
it.
the basis was for coming to that recommendation.
Right.
And I think it's also important to recognize the things that we heard that we maybe chose, that we didn't agree with or chose not to incorporate into our plan, and give some reason why.
Which there's not a huge amount of.
There really isn't.
Yeah, which is very helpful to.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, a classic example of a possible recommendation coming out of this committee is, posting or placing what it is, the conservation restriction on the warrant article. I mean, that's,
It's what everybody seems to want.
yeah.
Let's see
Well,
how it will allow for golf.
I've heard a lot of that, and I've also heard that it may make sense now, but does it make sense forever? And so is there something that can be done in between that allows provides a level of comfort for people
Like
to
a
do
vote
it?
at town meeting 30 years from now?
I just think 30 years from now,
Yeah.
we're gonna be thankful that we preserved what's there because there will be no land left to build.
Knowing
And-
that, I would sell my house immediately when the conservation
I know, I
restriction was
just-
put on it.
Yeah.
I would hate to go through the same thing over again in
don't-
10, 15, 20, 30 years.
And personally,
I mean,
I'm
we moved
here
here
in
for
town.
this, we moved here for this beautiful
Right.
open space.
Yeah, I'm voting on it. I plan on being here, paying down the public safety facility and the purchase of the land. So in 30 years, you know, I would have liked my vote at town meeting to know what I was actually voting and helping to pay for, contributing for the town.
I agree with you, and I do think that was brought up tonight, this
Yeah,
lack
that-
of clarity
that's been a constant
on what,
thing. Yeah.
what we're voting for. People don't know what they're voting for, and I remember the night that the abutters came and one of the, you know, there was confusion as to our name was master plan committee and we don't have a master
Exactly,
plan.
exactly.
Yeah, so I think that is, you're right, a common theme.
Yeah, well,
But in fairness though, Jenny, I think that comment was a little premature. I mean, I view the public input process that we went through as part of a master plan.
Right, oh, absolutely.
Planning.
Right.
So I think that was a little unfair, but.
I think the product that we have is a good product. I think that Matt did a great job.
I agree.
And we have some great options. At first, I was a little hesitant towards a few of them, but then after seeing the chill field and reworking and the coming through on Woodward, and I have to say, it's a pretty decent plan. I think it was also great to have Matt go through that study to really figure out what the 50% is, or what's left after you take the setbacks, the wetlands, and so I think we've come a long way. It's pretty impressive.
I think, again, it's just a win-win for so many groups.
I do too. All of them. Eventually be ball field over there, who knows? Someday at the golf course, whatever, you know what I mean? You don't know.
I think we did.
You don't know.
We're getting on a
one
little
other
bit,
point, Lisa.
we got plenty of ball fields, that's not it.
Sam wants the table.
I'm sorry, Sam. don't-
Sorry, Sam.
We need a V shape here.
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody read that purchase and sale agreement. I think there's some interesting little holes in there. It's late in the game, and I think it's probably heretical to raise any of those issues, but I mean, there's some outs in there that I wasn't expecting to see. There's some places where things aren't mutual, and I would normally look for mutual obligations of the parties. But that's not going to get redone, so I'm not sure it's worth raising that kind of issue. But I just wonder, if anybody reads that carefully, there may be some interesting questions at town meeting around that, and there are enough lawyers in town that I think can find things to poke at there. So I'm not quite sure what to do about that. I mean, I think the ultimate answer is this is the deal on the table. And yes, in other circumstances, maybe the town could have negotiated a little differently, but we don't know what the give and take was around those things. So it's not particularly productive to second guess at this point. You got to grit your teeth and decide that there's a reasonable chance that it will work out as intended, and go for it. So again, I'm conflicted about that, but my net position is to sort of keep going and don't spend a lot of energy doing that. But I don't know if others looked at that stuff as well. I mean, Tim, you said you looked through it. Did you?
I looked at just the restriction section because I was curious to see how they were defining what can't be developed.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was actually pleasantly surprised because it leaves open the possibility to further define it.
For other things.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, again, my proposal, I guess, is that we don't spend a lot of energy there, but I think it would be useful, and I will think a little bit about it, to how we deal with questions that might come from the audience at town meeting to say, did you read clause 39B? What's going on with that? This is a horrible deal. Why should we actually ever agree to something like that? My bet is that there may be something like that that comes up,
Yes.
and I think you can answer it pretty succinctly and say, let's keep going.
Well, we should probably assign groups to,
Couples.
Couples?
couples. For me personally, next week's vacation week for school and I'm gone. I will be at Wednesday's meeting, so I have prior plans that unfortunately I can't change with my monster, so. I am happy to do everything up until, I'm not leaving until Tuesday, so I am happy to work with whoever and do whatever, so.
I won't be a good match for you because I work on the weekends. So that's my busiest time, so I would need to match with somebody that could work after the weekend to get this ready for Wednesday.
Do we want to be, obviously, on open space, so I don't know necessarily, obviously I have an opinion, a very strong opinion there, so I don't know necessarily that I might be, I'd love to be the person to take on that challenge with somebody, but it, yeah, I just don't know what everybody's
But
thoughts are
it's in the
towards
notes,
that.
we're really
It's
just.
Right,
really
it's
gathering
yeah,
information,
yes,
so,
right.
So-
Stephen and I volunteer to do something.
SNS, we don't get it
That's
covered.
right.
All right,
Which one? It
My
doesn't
next door
matter if you
neighbor
wanna-
here and I will work on something as well, so.
there you go.
You got two here.
All right, how about my council on aging?
I'd like to do the input one that included the council.
I wasn't here for that, so
For
I
somebody.
even going through the notes. Okay. So who, it was council and recreation.
Wait a minute, at least the two of which doesn't want.
I can work with Joe.
Okay.
Well, I mean, does that work with your?
Joe, can you work with Jimmy?
I don't know,
I don't think so.
We should do it during the summer, on Sundays.
Shh,
Yeah.
that was her.
That was on the record.
Yeah.
John's
Well,
watching.
how about then, do you want to work with me on open space?
I'll work with
You're very
whoever's-
objective and
whoever's
I
interested.
respect that, so.
If you can put up with listening to me.
Absolutely, no, I think you're very insightful, so I would be happy to do that. And then
Okay.
Recreation and Council on Aging, who met at the same time that night as well. They were both together.
So what are you saying?
Yeah, with,
So who,
So who's gonna do what groups, I guess, is the
Yeah.
next question. We know who the people are.
right.
so do you, butters wanna do the butters?
butters and
Right.
engagers.
Yeah.
And I'll do open space. You good with that?
Joe, you wanna do
Okay.
recreation and, or
Oh, Brian, as well.
What
was
else
it
do we have?
historical and
Historical
open
and open
space?
space were together.
Then recreation and council on aging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll do that with somebody.
All other parties and,
Why don't we do the golf course users?
Oh,
and the
that's a good
butters?
one. That's a
That's
good
the
one.
butters.
That's a good one. Oh,
And so
I
we
think
only
the
have
butters
4
and the users
input.
were
I know,
together.
that's what
That
I'm
was
thinking.
all other.
All others, so.
Town committees, no one.
So why don't we do the golf course users and break it down, they do the butters. We'll break down that meeting.
Or do you want to work together?
Oh, we can do that.
Work together.
Work
I mean,
together.
I think we've got a lot of
So
body.
that would be
A lot of that's already worked, a lot of that's worked out already.
Yeah, right.
You already wrote some, I wrote some.
I was feeling that I was a lot of duplicity
I
in
think
what was
there's
already
a lot
written.
on the golf course.
Yeah, that's why it might be good
I think
to.
that's one subject.
Yeah, I mean, I'd take that on. The golf course users.
Yeah,
You want to take that on?
yeah.
All right.
Okay,
And then you
let's
just
do
spoke
the
to
I think
the
there's a lot.
Because there is a lot with the golf course. There's
Okay, so I have Ed and, okay, Mary are doing the abutters. So that's gonna leave recreation,
Council on Aging.
yep, rec and council. Okay, Sam, who are you with?
Steven,
Stephen and Sam.
yeah.
I thought Bill wanted to do council on aging.
They do.
Okay, then do you guys wanna do,
What's left?
We have open space, who's doing?
oh, Tim and I are gonna do open space.
We have,
Historical really wasn't,
All other.
We have all others,
all others?
and then there's one other meeting.
Okay.
Southborough Town, other town departments and boards.
Yeah, that was kind of a.
Which wasn't much.
That wasn't much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was a couple of sentences.
for the all others?
Yeah.
yeah, all others,
Historical.
the save the golf course.
Kate was here representing historical, so,
But she didn't say that.
Okay, so we'll do
She
all
said they had
others.
formed an opinion.
Yeah.
no, I know, yeah, they
She
did,
spoke as
but,
herself, her and Deb Constantine.
oh, she
spoke
did
that
represent
night.
her.
Well,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
if we could work in groups based on the formats of each session, then we can, I wouldn't break it up In other words, so open space and historical should be the same working group.
Okay, yeah,
Rec and council on aging should be the same.
yeah.
Because the output from that is going to be put under that tab on the website too. So it doesn't make sense to have two separate sheets as it is. You know, you can break out your comments based on those two. But yeah, maybe there's only 4 groups. So,
Yeah.
easy. Yeah.
Because like historical, Kate,
So that leaves Sam and
Actually-
Steven. Do you guys want to work with,
Are we all other?
you're gonna do all other, because there wasn't a whole lot, I can't imagine.
Well, there was the group,
Say-
Arnie was there, I think,
She's,
I think there was a group of people,
that night
there
she
was somebody
spoke.
sitting behind, there were a bunch of people that spoke, as I recall.
The
Yeah,
February
there's
1st
a lot of
meeting.
information. It just wasn't from a particular group.
Organized.
Citizens at large.
Citizens
at
large,
Citizens,
yeah.
Okay,
Sounds
so
good.
Ginny and Joe for golf, Lisa and Tim for open space historical, Brian and Bill for recreation and council on aging, Ed and Larry for butters, and Stephen and Sam all others. If that would leave, I think that's what we,
Yeah, just golf was users and abutters. That was the users and abutters night. So whatever
Right.
your information is,
Right.
should come together. It is one
Stephen's
one
right.
document.
Stephen and Sam are doing.
Stephen and Sam do all others. And I'm totally flexible, whatever, however.
I seem to think that we. I thought that there was a reason why next Wednesday was not optimal for this group. Or maybe Tuesday night would have been better. I thought it was because there was other meetings on Wednesday night.
Yeah, we should probably make sure that we can even have a forum.
I actually conflated.
I think we might have some, I think we might have some troubles with next Wednesday. Are you out? I think Ed's out.
I'm
Lisa,
out.
you're out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have,
Um,
I'm staying local, but.
So that's the 22nd, right?
Next
Yes.
Wednesday.
So that
Yeah, I'm
is
around.
There's no meetings on the 22nd.
Because I'm actually leaving, I have, I'm leaving Tuesday the 21st, but I'm leaving at noon, so unless we did something Monday, but that's President, the federal
Monday's
holiday.
out for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
It's,
Tuesday I could do.
Wait, which Tuesday, the 21st?
Tuesday the 21st, I'm not available, but
I thought the selectmen are meeting next week, aren't they?
Yeah, they were off this week, so next week.
They're meeting Tuesday the 22nd, right?
Tuesday's the 21st.
Yeah.
I think they were trying to do the, last I heard was the public safety, they were gonna do a thing at Trottier with public safety.
That night?
And I heard, last I heard was they were looking at possibly the 23rd. Now whether that's stuck, I don't know.
23rd?
But that wouldn't affect us, would it?
I'm sorry?
That wouldn't affect us if we wanted to meet on the Tuesday.
No, it wouldn't, but I'm just saying someone, so,
Can we meet Tuesday the 21st instead of Wednesday the 22nd?
I can.
I can, but Joe, can you
That's
do the
a selectmen's
21st?
meeting,
Joe can
yeah.
do it.
Is
So
that
we
the
need-
selectmen's meeting?
I have selectmen's meeting for the 21st, yeah.
But
Right,
that
because
doesn't
they-
affect us though,
Well,
does it?
only if we had something to present to them, which we don't.
We won't if we haven't met yet.
Yeah.
So they suggested the sooner we get to them, the better.
Right.
Because the week after is their
Yeah.
meeting,
Run
planning
through,
meeting. They're gonna be
yeah.
discussing the setup for the special town meeting.
Right.
So if we meet the 21st, can we request to meet with them? We can't meet with them until their next meeting? Is that what you're saying?
We could meet with them at 10 o'clock.
I don't know if we have anything to present to them on the 21st.
No, because we need to meet.
Yeah, we can ask to be on the 28th.
Okay.
The 28th is
Yeah,
the
so
run through
if we could
town.
meet on the 21st, or Tuesday, to see where we're at, and then we still have a whole week before we have
Well-
something to, a draft to present to the selectmen.
The 28th is the
The
run through the
28th
town
is their run through for the town.
Well, that makes sense, Tim, if we are in fact gonna make a presentation at the special town meeting.
Which I don't think I think their meeting this coming Tuesday is going to be to determine that, but I think what we've heard from them informally is they would like for us to at least present our findings. I'm sure they'd like to hear what our findings are first. So,
Surprise.
can we meet on Tuesday? I mean,
Instead of the
I can't make
22nd?
it. I don't know if Brian can, but we can check with him. Instead of the 22nd. I mean, if it has to be the 22nd, I can do it.
We have to see if this,
I can do this.
Push off the day.
when is advisory meeting, Sam?
It may be the 21st, but we're still waffling, so I mean, if I can't do it, I'll try to juggle.
Well, I'm just saying advisory usually meets here, so we may have to find someplace else for you guys to meet on the 21st.
We have not set a meeting for the 21st, but we were talking the other night about the possibility of the 21st.
Okay,
But there's room enough here for two, so.
We can put the walls up.
That's right.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, I can do the 21st as well, so.
21st. Selectmen are meeting, Tim, you said selectmen are meeting the 21st as well?
That's
I
my
said
understanding.
that, yeah.
I think that's what they told us last week.
But I have on our calendar.
It's not on a town calendar.
Okay, no, it's not yet.
Typically not till a few days before.
Okay,
All right, so just actually put
Materials up there.
Perfect.
say,
Yep.
"I'll have it ready 2 months in advance."
I'll shoot it out tonight.
So the next meeting, there'll be no public input, it'll be just strictly us doing what we
It's
do.
a working-
It's a working session for
Yeah.
us. Our goal is to have the notes, questions, comments, recommendations
So
for
we
each
shouldn't-
input session for.
So we shouldn't be in
for
a
review
long
that
thin
Tuesday.
table, we should be in a,
Yeah, well,
yeah, so we can see each other.
right.
Yeah.
And
What a
then-
great idea. Either that or we'll
Did you
install
see
a
something down
telegraph or
there?
something.
You know, my phone?
Phones, we'll have phones on each station.
Wait to get all the text.
Okay.
This
What
is how
about
the Politburo meets.
What about the outline of the presentation? Are we gonna wait till Tuesday to see and do it then, or Sam suggested doing it simultaneously, doing it in parallel track?
I think we should probably come to the meeting with some ideas of what we want that presentation to
If
look like.
anybody has thoughts,
Yeah.
say bring it,
Yeah.
let's compare
Yeah.
notes.
Okay.
Can you email, or are we allowed to do the thoughts?
I actually started
Probably
it.
not.
I did
careful
start
with
it,
that.
but, because I think one of the things that Brian always goes back to is he always hones in on the review of our charge. And I think we have to start out our presentation by discussing what we really truly were charged to do. That's all I came up with.
Great stuff.
And then we actually did.
Come back, John.
So I think to Sam's point though, if we have to get down to the few points that we really want to make here, beyond our charge, I mean, there's this, whatever we're going to say there, it should just be 3 or 4 bullet points to tee up the rest of the presentation and how we got there.
And sadly, if you look at what happens at town meeting typically, there's apparently an innate urge for people to replay the last 50 years of what's been going on, kind of stuff. And here's the 500 things that our committee did, most of which didn't really matter relative to the conclusion. So I think it's really valuable to have a clear, concise, bang, 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 here's what happened. And then if somebody asks a question, to say, well, how did you get to that conclusion? Well, we got all that, happy to talk about it and provide answers. Even better to post it on the website.
Website, yeah.
Before that, to say, here's the background for the things that we're suggesting, recommending, commenting on, or whatever. So, I mean, yeah.
Well, the
Yeah,
minutes are on the
somehow.
website, though, Sam. And our minutes reflect the discussions we had.
So speaking of the website, great segue. I was going to post all these diagrams we've been looking at over the last 2 weeks, and title them working diagrams, preliminary designs, that kind of stuff. So, and create a new section called master plan diagrams, and things we've been working on with the public safety committee, all the stuff we're looking at. That sounds okay. I'll go ahead and do that. If there's other recommendations, I will do whatever we think is best there.
Is there some nomenclature that we should use for a diagram that's just kind of protects us as a group, like whether we call it schematic on everything, or, I guess, I don't want any repercussions of somebody coming back to us and saying, you did this, so this didn't work, I just want to protect ourselves.
I think the word diagram has a lot less definition than schematic.
Yeah, or plan.
Because it's,
Yeah.
the diagram is a sketch.
Yeah.
And a lot of the work that we have is nothing more than that.
Yeah, no, I.
So I think if we put one representative diagram that we've arrived at that we wanted to take to further, if that makes sense, but there's a lot of other ones that are just kind of handwritten things that probably don't need to make their way on the website, but here's the diagram that we arrived at for this date. And then you can show a sequence of how it morphed. I think would be helpful.
Do we don't have something like that right now. We have the land use, and we have, well, the things were presented to the selectmen, and then this.
Yeah, so if we, you get the land use, the net buildable plan is a separate one by itself.
Yep.
You have, start with the public safety complex schematic that they're working with. Then you get the art diagram that shows the early stages of the loop road, right?
Yep.
And then Matt has like a 3-page PDF that has the same diagram with a little more definition to it, some of it showing what's underneath, what's not, and then, I don't know if you saw that, there's up to 3 pages to that.
Yep, okay.
Then you can show,
Do you want to show the one, did he do the one with the community center? He was going to work on that.
Oh, I've seen it
I think
circulated.
it just got circulated. So we have to, we should decide on whether or not something like that goes in.
Yeah, it arrived right before our meeting started.
And then show the one with the public safety complex adjusted to accommodate the,
This one here, or?
yeah, the one that was presented tonight.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep.
There's probably,
Yeah,
there's probably
I'll do-
only 4 or 5.
Yeah, and I'll do dates, I'll put the dates in the title so it's clear that it's,
Yeah.
this is the work. It's a progression.
Right.
No, this is something Brian just emailed, we didn't review
It
this.
just came in?
I believe today.
Yeah, it was sent at
Yeah, it
must have been,
Right before the meeting
Yeah.
started.
today.
So, is Matt working on anything additional now?
Not right now, no. He's away for a couple days.
Did the contract actually get signed?
I believe it did.
So Tim, will you work with him on the
Unbelievable.
6 acres for the septic?
Yes.
And getting that depicted? Oh,
Yeah, if you can send that to me, I'll,
Yes.
yeah.
Money down.
This
Okay.
was the one that we got, that we discussed
Yeah,
tonight.
that's
There
not-
was something
And who do we
else.
communicate
Yeah, 621
to
was another-
regarding the
I
discrepancy in
did
the
not-
acreage?
That one came in
Matt
at
as well.
12:34.
Yeah.
I've got that. I think
Yeah.
the notes
I
are not
did
here.
not get a 621.
Well, check it out.
We can, you know what, we can look at that and discuss it at the next meeting and decide where to put it in the.
Whether or not.
Okay. The one with the extra, the building and.
Yeah, I think,
adjusted
I mean,
golf
the reason why I thought it would be a good idea to show is to just give recognition to the input that we've received.
Right.
But I think with
Bigger
that,
than
we also need to form an opinion on whether or not we think it's a good idea.
Right.
You know, so, you know,
Bigger
it
than
may
the
not
public
be,
safety.
Yeah.
productive or supportive of a recommendation if you're recommending that something else be done to the property at the same time. You know, you're showing a deed restriction, so, you know.
And at our last meeting, we said we were gonna take a look at that first, so I won't post that one right now, but. we can-
Yeah, no,
we'll
I think
discuss
it should be, but, you know, I think we need to be careful about, you know, what's posted and how it's posted.
Right, okay.
What's the size of the seniors recreation depicted in this?
I think the program that Bill gave us was around 30,000 feet, is that right?
40.
40.
40?
And what is the current public safety, 35?
36.
36.
But that's the one that they have the night whole going through all wooded areas.
Right. On the minutes,
Yeah, let's do it.
let's do it.
A babysitter will leave.
Did, I know on the 6th, did anyone have any further edits? I know Sam, Tim, and I think, this wasn't the one I think Jill commented on.
Let's do that.
Was it Stephen that
Steve
had?
or-
Steve, yeah.
I had no further edits myself on that one,
On the 6th?
on the 6th. Did anyone else?
There's one typo, I think, on, was it line 31?
Well,
And I could be
That's
the
not
wrong
on the
page.
6th.
Maybe that was that.
Criticized,
on the
I
18th.
misspelled on one of
Okay,
those.
then there was one that,
I found a couple typos myself on the next one.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is that on the 6th? There was a criticize that I misspelled on one of them. I thought that was the 6th. So,
No, that was a typo.
All right, so do we have a motion on the 6th?
I'll move we approve the amended, edited version.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Hey, Lisa?
Yes.
The only trick is that if there was somebody who wasn't there for one of these meetings, they ought to abstain.
Abstain? Yeah, that was actually, so that was Joe and Brian.
Yeah, they
Brian's
didn't
not
vote.
here anyway,
Joe
Joe just
wasn't here.
wasn't here for the vote, so.
Okay.
For the next meeting on the,
Right.
yeah, sorry.
Getting tired.
For the next meeting, Bill wasn't here, it was the 7th? No, yes. The 7th. I found line 22, there was a typo. Criticize.
Yep.
And then, Tim, on line 26, should we add he discussed and presented instead of the presented? Is that correct? Okay.
It was just a test, Lisa, we left those for you.
That's okay. I did find them, Sam. I'm really happy that I could actually add some
A+.
additional input, so.
I thought there was one on line 31 somewhere.
31, okay.
It could be wrong.
And there was a couple of words on lines, I'm trying to see, if there was word 11 or line 12.
12.
Citing the strong of interest, just removing.
So we're at the.
On the 7th, right?
Yes.
Just make sure that you have the right.
Delete a few things, citing
Is this the
strong
one that
interest.
has one comments?
Yes, both.
Okay, because I made further
Second.
comments to one, and I think that was on the 8th.
No, it was the 7th, I
It was,
believe.
okay.
Pretty sure it was, because I actually adjusted them. I didn't bring that up top.
Yeah, I would want to make sure draft and put in there.
Yeah. Okay. So Stephen, you had additional
Yeah, I think it's on line 12.
line 12?
Uh, Cite, the end of line 11 there, citing
A strong interest.
a strong interest of, or strong of interest, that just remove the A and of there. It's just
Citing, okay.
citing strong interest from the
Just strike
community.
it.
Yep,
All right.
okay. And Ginny, what was yours on 31?
I can't remember which one it was.
So,
This is the
Was
seventh.
it
That's the
typo?
seventh.
Selected.
I made the change and then I realized that I wasn't in the,
Well, that's my bad sentence.
I don't see any typos.
no, okay, that's fine. I must have done a different one.
All right, Joe, did you have any comments on the 7th? Any further edits on the 7th? We voted on the 6th, you weren't here anyway, so.
Okay.
Okay. Okay,
You said, no,
Did you fix 21?
21,
He looks forward.
No, the committee looks forward. That our committee looks forward to it working. We was crossed out.
so what was the change on that one? I'm sorry.
That's
I
from
might have the wrong version.
Oh, okay, okay.
I think I have the we in mind too, I don't know if it's.
Yeah, we in item 21 where it says, and that our committee, we looks forward. So take out the, is the
I don't
we,
even have that. Is that on the final?
I thought so.
Tim did some additional edits
maybe.
Yeah.
and sent them out, because I don't have that on.
Okay, so
mine.
you got that edit already made.
yeah, I see.
The latest version.
Was that on the final one? Tim sent
I
another one out
believe
this
it's the final
afternoon.
one.
Or criticized.
And Brian recirculated it as well.
There was another, that was before your edits. What Brian circulated was before your second set of
The
edits.
one that came today at 12:31 minutes.
No, it was, Tim did an edit
I sent it.
before, I sent that to Brian in the morning, and then Tim did another round of edits. So disregard that email from Brian. He sent it after there was another set of edits.
After Tim sent his, yeah, it's a real
Hold on.
step.
Mine was at
10 something, wasn't it?
10:37, and Brian sent around
but I had sent it before
Oh, you
your
sent-
set of
ah,
edits.
okay.
Yeah, I had sent it to Brian prior, so, what Brian sent around at noontime doesn't reflect the second set of edits.
Okay.
Okay. So
But anyway,
disregard.
that particular point was fixed then.
I can read you that sentence if you want, and what I have, I printed out after the edits, starting on line 19. Brian praised the Public Safety Committee for their dedication and hard work for the 2+ years they have been working on their product, and stated that by no means are the diagrams presented by our committee meant to criticize that work, and our committee looks forward to working collaboratively with the PSSC. That was the final that I had.
Shows on my red line.
I did find it.
So, are you done with that now?
Yeah, these encompass your final.
So so what you're saying, Lisa, is we should be looking at the one that came in at 10:37?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So that was the one I think I found the error on.
Okay. Yeah, the one from Tim.
Yes.
That was the last of the edits.
That included Steve's comments.
Yes. Yep.
And mine too, I think.
Yes, it did, Sam.
Okay, so line 31.
Oh.
Oh, not on the 8th yet.
No, we're not on the 8th, we're on the 7th.
So are we set?
We're set, just in
Okay.
motion.
I move that we approve the minutes from 2/7 as amended.
Second.
Steve, yep. All in favor?
Aye. Bill wasn't there.
Abstaining,
for that.
Bill. Yeah. Okay. Now, on the meeting on the 8th, Larry
I was
has
not
to
present.
abstain.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any further edits on?
Are we going off the one that Brian sent on the 14th?
No. Did you make?
I did.
Tim made additional edits. So go by Tim's.
They're all part of the same email.
Yes, on
I put
the same
all
time.
3 minutes with,
I don't know why I don't have that
with
email.
everybody's
It was
comments.
sent on 10.
It was 10:30 this morning.
10:30. Do you want me to re-forward it to you, Ed?
Sure.
I just responded to someone else's.
I sent the red line and then you add some more, I think.
I made further revisions. Here it is, 10:37. No, it didn't, but I'll re-forward it.
Jim, Steve, just something to do. Yeah. You can call the one.
Is it, Ed, is it the at aim.com?
Yeah,
Okay.
Larry just gave it to me, so I.
Oh,
can-
okay, never mind then. Okay, I was gonna forward it. That's fine. That's fine. Okay. I only found one other typo on that.
So line 31 says,
Okay.
he feels we need to make suggestions to the Board of Selectmen as to how best to do this.
How best to present my position to the public?
Yeah.
As to how best to, it's gotta be better way said.
There's a lot of twos in that line.
How to best present.
Yeah, as selectmen, as to how to best present, take out the 2.
Okay.
How's that?
Which line are we on?
Line 31,
Just take it out of 2.
Oh, okay.
taking out one of the 2s. The only other thing I have is on line 89. Need was capitalized, so I'll just lowercase that. We need clarity. That was the only other thing.
We do need to capitalize that.
Well, I kind of thought so. I kind of was thinking the point of, yeah, that makes sense, but,
There's a misspelling on what shows as mine is line 87.
line 87,
Listing, Ed thinks we should be truly making recommendations.
that's sorry, Sam, I can't hear you.
Ed thinks we should be truly making a recommendation. It's on 87 on mine, but my line
It's
is
not on the
It's not on mine
affected
either.
by the red line. You see, Ed thinks we should?
Ed thinks we should, okay, 84 on mine.
Okay.
Okay, we truly making a recommendation.
Listing.
Oh, okay,
As an
yep,
extra L.
got it.
Little-
Listing. A new word. Okay.
Well, I don't know. I got it on this thing, but I don't think it did. Oh, well.
Any further edits? We're still
On-
looking?
Yeah, the,
Okay.
I think it, on mine it's 75.
Okay.
Brian shared that next week we're having a joint meeting with the Public Safety Issues. I guess their official name is Public Safety Study Committee. Correct.
Okay, let me figure out where that's at.
That is line 76 for me.
These lines
Oh, yep, got it, 77 for me, okay. Public Safety Study Committee, got it. Good catch, Stephen.
I've never looked in this. Is this just a table?
And then on line 56, the same catch, the Brian, oh.
At 68 on mine, Jason Morasso, the public safety.
You know what, I'll go through and I'll double check all of those,
That happens
just for
several
consistency, because there's another one here.
Public safety study.
Yep, and it's study. I'll go through and I'll adjust all of those if they need to
Okay.
be. No problem, there's another one on 65.
Yeah.
So do you want to wait to, or?
No, I think we can make it with the amendment that,
Yeah. As amended.
as amended, absolutely, I'll make sure.
I
that's
can
taken care of.
make a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of February 8th, 2017.
Second.
As amended.
Second? Oh, I'm sorry, I can't second.
Third, fourth.
Yep. Second.
Steven, okay. All in favor, other than Larry?
Aye.
Okay,
Larry doesn't get to vote.
perfect.
And then whoever gets the final version of those together, just if you could send those over to me and
I'll do it tonight.
get
How's
those
that?
up on the site. Okay.
My brain's.
I'll send them tonight, how's that? 'Cause I'm gonna scan these as well when I get home, so.
Great.
Done.
Okay. Does anyone have any other business?
Yeah, just a clarification.
Yes.
So the working groups, after they go back and forth between themselves,
Yep.
are then gonna share their summaries
On
with the committee?
On the 21st, they're gonna
Yeah.
go through them.
If you
Yep,
can get them circulated.
prior
If you
to.
can circulate them
Right.
prior, I would
Prior
do
to,
that.
Yep.
yeah.
And then we can
yep.
ratify them, so to speak, at the meeting.
I'll talk to you after.
All right.
Should we, vote to adjourn?
We can definitely do that.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Sam.
All in favor?
Aye.